I'm a 33-year-old female, and I went to a convention with 2 female friends, and we stayed in a downtown area hotel near the convention center. Caddy corner from our hotel was a chain drugstore. It was still light outside when we decided to get some snacks to eat while watching some Netflix that night. While my friends were looking at the candy, I stood back because I wanted chips, and I had noticed a man next to them. He wasn't looking at the candy. He was watching them. They hadn't noticed, so when they picked their candy, I then whispered to them to follow me. I picked up the pace, turned quickly down the middle and down an aisle, and I told them there's a creepy guy here and to stay together. That's when I noticed that he's on the other end of the aisle. We keep taking turns down various aisles, and he's following us, but walking where he's in between us and the exit. At this time, we were basically trapped at the back of the store near the pharmacy. The line for the pharmacy was long, but was full of men, so we got in line and started talking to the men in front of us, hoping it would scare off our stalker. We could still see him in the big glow mirror 1 aisle down waiting for us. We waited in line for 30 minutes to ask for security. The security swept the pharmacy, and luckily the stalker guy had left. We were extra careful when the security guard offered to walk us back to the front of our hotel. I don't know what the intentions that guy had for us, but I'm glad I'll never find out. Hey y'all, this took place during the summer of 2022, and I just never thought of writing down this story because I was just so stunned that it even happened to me. So every summer in my city, me and my friends like to make small campfires in chill, secluded areas because, well, we don't want to drive an hour to an actual campsite and pay a campsite fee to do so. These also happen pretty spontaneously, so it's a nice last-minute hang to do. There's this one spot near my house that's located by a river that's really nice because no one usually goes there. The only thing to be worried about are bears though, because living in the Pacific Northwest is challenging like that. And my house specifically is located right next to mountains and forest. So one particular night at 11 p.m., I decided to go ahead of my friends and meet them at the spot and set up things early because I want us to be chilling once they all get there. The spot I get to has a 2-minute paved walkway that I have to go through, and then I have to take a small trail ramping down the right side of the bridge that crosses over the river. Along this paved walkway is 2 lamps located at halfway, and then another at the start of the bridge and ramp down to the campfire spot. I park my car at the beginning of the trail on the street, and I bring my campfire stuff like flashlight, lighter, small firewood, small shovel to dig out the pit, etc. I get to the spot, and it's a small sandy beach kind of embankment on the side of the river with a small waiting area for toddlers with their families during the hot summers. So I set up the chair, and I get to digging the pit with only my flashlight illuminating where I'm digging. I'm also just shoveling the sand right next to me, nowhere near the water. But all of a sudden, I hear a loud splash. A splash so loud that it can only come from something equally large like a 2-hand-sized rock. I'm confused because I swear I'm not throwing my sand into the water, even though I'm only a few feet away. I shine my flashlight at the water, and I don't see anything. So I kind of just brush it off, thinking I'm just hearing things. But as I keep shoveling a bit more, I hear another loud splash. At this point, I think something is falling from above because logically something must be falling into the water. I point the flashlight above where some trees are above the river, and I don't see anything big enough to make that splash. So as I keep digging, with my heart rate kind of going at this point, I hear a rustling past the arch of where the bridge goes over the river. I quickly grab my light and shine it towards where I hear all the rustling. I call out a, "Hello?" No response. In my head, if it was a bear, I should be getting out of there immediately. But there was no bear. That or any signs of anything for that matter. So I tell myself I'm just hearing things now, because I've seen horror movies before, and now my mind is just playing tricks on me. But I hear the noise yet again, and it clearly sounds like leaves being rustled. So I shine my flashlight over to that same area yet again, and as I focus my eyes towards the illuminated area, I see the naked back of a man hunched over. I was kind of frozen in anxiety and stress because honestly, of all the things I was to see, I didn't think I'd see the back of a naked man. From the quick analysis my brain could muster up, he looked to be mid-40s, shaved not bald, and a medium-ish build, like a mix between chubby and built. As I had my flashlight staying on his back, he started to stand up, and the first thing I noticed was that he wasn't wearing any pants either. My next reflex was to start packing up all my crap and getting the hell out of there, because now I'm piecing in my head that he must have been throwing things into the water to scare me or shoo me away. So after using my reflexive deductive skills, I proceeded to walk out of there with all of my stuff. I'm carrying all my things with me, and I brusquely walk up the small ramp, and I'm on the paved path now out of the forest. I can just feel my heart beating in my chest, and I'm frequently looking back just to make sure I'm not being followed. I'm in Crocs, mind you, so I'm hoping that if I have to book it out of there, I'd regret not being in sport mode from the get-go. I make it to the halfway point, and a sense of relief starts settling in, knowing I made it safely out of this very scary situation. But as I check behind me for the final time, I see something. Slowly creeping over the ramp is the naked man crawling on all fours as if he was a primate walking. His head was positioned towards me, looking right at me as he made his way to the middle of the paved walkway. He slowly gets up from his stance and starts standing on his feet and positions his body to face me. After setting himself into his new position, the man starts running towards me. I freaking book it. I run as hard as I can down the path. My flashlight jumped out of my pocket and I lost it, but I didn't care because a whole naked ass man was chasing me at 11 p.m. at night in a secluded forest. I looked back for a split second and the man was still running towards me, still completely naked. He could have my flashlight for all I care. I wanted to make it out of this situation alive. I finally make it out of the forest and I run to my car, which is only 30 feet away from the end of the forest. I desperately get to my car, and like a classic horror movie, I then fumble with trying to get my key fob to unlock my car. I actually drop my keys and quickly think to myself, yeah, I'm actually dead. But I brush the thought off and pick them back up. I get my fob properly, unlock my doors, and throw my things into my back seat before getting into my car. This felt like an eternity, but in hindsight, most likely took 6 seconds altogether. As I try to guide my key into the ignition, I'm fixated on the end of the paved path that I was just at a few seconds ago, waiting to see if the naked man was coming still. I feel my key go into the ignition, and I switch my sights into the road in front of me. I then zoom out of the area as fast as possible. As I drive away, and I'm a good 30 seconds from the location of the horror that just took place, I then get a call on my phone. It was my friends calling me, asking if I'd made it to the spot yet, and all I say to them is, "Guys, do I have a crazy story to tell you?" They pull up to my house because again, it was actually decently close to the campfire area, and I then tell them the whole story the way that I told it just now. They all swear that it was none of them trying to prank me or anything like that. I also knew none of them would try to full sprint at me with their dong out. But as we're just talking out in front of my house, there's actually a college student who looks like he's walking home that's towards the direction of where I encountered the naked man. I just yelled out to him, "Yo, be careful! There was some naked guy that was chasing me by the bridge that crosses over the river. So be careful, man." He responds back saying, "Oh damn, really? I gotta go over that bridge to go home." All I tell him is, "Yeah, well, good luck, man." The next day I reported it to the police by phone, but they sent over an officer so I could tell them in person and also show them where in the area I saw these things. When we went to see where I initially saw the man's back hunched over, they said they didn't see any trace of anyone being there previously. But the officer said they would make a note of it anyways just in case it happens again. Some of my friends say it's a skinwalker. Others say more realistically it's either a homeless or mentally ill or drunken high person. One theory I've heard my friends say is that it's a future version of me pulling a prank on a past version of me. Because honestly, if time travel is real, I totally would screw with my younger self like that. That's pretty much my only let's not meet story. But damn, is it a story I'll never forget. The story happened around 3 years ago, right around the time that COVID started, so it was a while back but still worthy of a post. It was early 2020, and I had just gotten a new job in a small town near my area. While looking for a place to live, my sister offered to rent her house to me. She had bought the house 2 years prior, but she and her husband didn't really take to it, and their commute to work was long, so they moved out and the house was uninhabited. Lucky for me, it was actually pretty close to my workplace, around a 40-minute drive, and my sister pretty much rented it out to me for free. I just paid for the water and electricity and looked after the house. I was living there for a solid 2 or 3 months and had already gotten used to it. One night after coming back from work and parking my car, as I walked towards my door, I noticed something odd. There was a cigarette butt on the curb to my house. I leaned down and picked it up, thinking it might have been mine since I'm a smoker. But after looking at the brand name, I realized that it wasn't mine and I threw it away. I didn't think much of it, just shrugged it off as some asshole throwing it at my curb. I went on with my night, and nothing unusual happened. 2 days later, I was once again walking to my house when I spotted a few more cigarette butts, this time near my porch. Needless to say, I was pissed off, and I thought that someone sat on my porch and smoked. I noticed that they were put out pretty recently, so whoever it was probably walked off as I was approaching. That night, I was watching a movie on my laptop, and it was pretty late, past 1 a.m., so I was surprised when I heard a car passing by. It was a suburban neighborhood, and it was COVID, so people rarely ventured out at night, but I didn't think much about it. Around half an hour later, I was surprised when I heard chattering nearby. I listened intently, but I couldn't hear what they were talking about, as their voices seemed almost muffled and quiet. By this point, I was getting a bit unnerved, so I stopped the movie and then quietly got off my sofa. I then walked to the front door just to make sure that it was locked. As I was approaching the door, I froze mid-step as I heard the two approaching my porch and reducing their talking to a whisper. I realized right away that whoever this was wanted to break in. I leaned against my door and waited, expecting a loud bang against the door or the doorknob being shaken, but it was oddly quiet. I decided to walk over to my window to see if they had walked away or changed their mind. My windows have bars from the inside out that you have to unlock so that you can move the curtains or look out the window comfortably. I slowly unlocked the bar mechanism and lifted it up. I moved the curtains and I was taken aback. Leaning up against my window was a man. He was just as startled as I was, because he basically stuttered over his own steps as he jumped back. He tightened his hoodie to cover his face, so all I could really see was his big blue eyes looking at me. His friend realized what was going on and right away started to kick the door in. He kicked it a solid 4 or 5 times, but the door wouldn't budge. All the while I was staring at them, frozen in fear and trying to comprehend the situation. I snapped out of it and slammed the bars over my window, locking them and running upstairs to the storage room where I'd pushed a table up to the door and then called the cops. As I listened intently and expected the two to come inside any minute, I heard a loud crash and the bars from the windows being shaken aggressively. When they realized they couldn't get in, one of them let out an angry long scream that probably woke up half the neighborhood. By the time the cops came, they were long gone. The police couldn't find out who it was, but were more active in the neighborhood in the following weeks. Regardless, I wasn't too keen on staying there after that, so shortly after I moved out. My sister sold the house a few months later, and as far as I know, nothing similar ever happened since. I honestly don't know what they wanted or why they were so determined to get in, but whoever it was, I just hope I don't encounter them again. This incident took place in the summer of 2023. Last year, I transferred with my company to take a new position in a major Midwestern city. My spouse was still working and living back in California for the next few months, so I rented a studio apartment for myself in a newly renovated apartment building in a popular downtown neighborhood until we could look for a place together. The apartment was small but nice. It was in a secure building with interior hallways and a nice downstairs lobby. I was one of the first tenants to move into this newly renovated building, and other new residents soon started moving in. A major advantage of this move was that I'd only be a couple of hours' drive from my hometown and my parents. I started my new job, and everything was going great. I was enjoying my new neighborhood, and the neighbors in the apartment building generally kept to themselves like I did. Then a new guy moved in across the hall, and everything changed. We'll call him David. David was a single man in his 60s and was very different from the college students and young professionals who lived in our building. I started noticing his erratic behavior almost immediately. I would come home from work and he would be sitting in his car in our small parking lot just staring off in the distance. We were having issues that summer with smoke clouds coming over from the vast Canadian wildfires. They were leaving a light dusting of ash on our cars similar to pollen. David was convinced that someone was spraying this dust on his car and was accusing various tenants he would run into in the parking lot. He would also hoard trash in his apartment and leave bags in the hallway causing a foul odor. He would also be yelling to himself in the hallway. I finally had enough and complained to the leasing office. The manager was quick to dismiss my concerns, saying that she'd been in his apartment and everything was fine. In August, my parents' 50th anniversary was coming up, and I was excited to go home and spend a weekend with them. A few days before their anniversary, my boss informed me that he would be flying in to work on an important project with me that would have us working through the weekend. I was really disappointed, and I felt like I was really letting my parents down. But I managed to get away for a quick overnight trip in the middle of the week to go see them, and then get back before my boss was due to arrive. I drove down and spent the night with them. The next morning, I checked my email just as I was getting ready to head back. There was an email from my apartment manager in regard to the incident the night before. The email was very vague, but it stated that a resident was dead and there would be further details coming later. My heart sank and I immediately went pale. My mind instinctively went to my strange neighbor, David. I opened up a local news app for my city, and the top story was about an active shooter in my apartment building who was killed during a SWAT team standoff just the night before. Apparently, David approached my next-door neighbor in the hallway with a gun and had threatened to shoot him. The neighbor then ran into his apartment and called 911. David also called 911, and he told the dispatcher that his neighbors were hacking his phone, and if the police didn't come, he was going to start shooting people. The police came and tried to talk to David, but he had barricaded himself in his apartment and claimed to be heavily armed. The state police and SWAT teams soon arrived, and David began firing a rifle out his window at anyone he saw in the parking lot below. All of the neighbors on my floor were trapped in their apartments with no way of escape. They all had to get down and barricade themselves from the gunfire. There was another building across the street with a direct line of sight into our apartment building. A police sniper took a position in the building across the street and shot David through his window. Then they flew a drone into his open window and confirmed that he was dead with a gun still in his hand. Luckily, no one else was injured. I got home later that day to a bullet-riddled apartment building, and several neighbors who normally didn't speak to each other were all hugging and crying, as well as showing each other videos of the incident from their hiding places. I've never been so lucky to have been out of town. If my boss hadn't messed up my plans, I would have been home that night. I'm really sorry David didn't get the mental health attention that he needed, but he put so many lives in danger. My name is Mark, and in 2021 I made an OnlyFans account. I wasn't famous before this all went down, and I used to have an Instagram where I had 2,000 followers. I know that's nothing in the social media sphere, but it felt cool. Times were tough in 2021, as everyone can attest to. I read these headlines about people making loads of money through OnlyFans, and I thought, fuck it, I'll try anything. I made an account and I got some subscribers, but I had to block my family and friends from my Instagram story where I advertised it. As the days passed, I realized I mostly had male subscribers. I'm straight, but I didn't mind this, and I'm not homophobic or anything. I basically just post nudes and videos jiggling my butt around. Anything to pay the bills at the end of the day. I wasn't on the path to millionairehood, but I had that mindset if I grind, I'll rake in cash. I know that's pretty delusional, but I've always been an optimist. After a month, I was brainstorming ways to get money out of OnlyFans. I didn't tell any of my friends because I was a bit embarrassed, and honestly, I didn't want them going on there to spy. I made burner accounts on Reddit, and I shared the link on some of the NSFW subs on there. I ended up getting some subscribers through that, and it led me to this guy who I'll just call the Creeper. He was always complimenting me in the Reddit comments. Even on different subs, his username was always under my stuff. On the OnlyFans, the Creeper sent me a message request, and he had a similar username to the Reddit one, so I knew it was him. He was offering me $300 for a custom photo. This was crazy high, and it got me hopeful. I asked what he wanted, and he said to send him a full frontal in a specific pose. I did this, and I got the $300. Then he asked me for audio of me moaning his name, and he said he'd give me $500. I almost fainted, thinking I'd hit the jackpot there. $800 in like 5 minutes from one dude was like a dream. I sent the audio, and he didn't reply for hours after giving me the money. I figured he was busy, but after a few hours, he messaged me back. He asked me for more audios, and he said he wanted to hear me jerk off. I sent more because it was just so much money. I figured the Creeper had to be some sort of sugar daddy dude if he had so much cash to splash around like that, especially all at once. As the weeks passed, I was significantly less stressed because Creeper was giving me so much money for personal things to be sent to him. The requests started to get a little weird, but I did them because I wanted the money, and I figured it wasn't a big deal. I must admit though, I did feel uncomfortable sometimes. He asked me to say stuff that I thought was a bit weird, like moaning that I loved him and that he was sexy. I thought he was just lonely or something. I worked in a coffee shop on a crappy wage, so the Creeper's money was really helping me out. A few more weeks passed, and I started growing closer to a girl I met through work. She was a customer who came in, and it got a little flirty between us. I was nervous about pursuing things though. I mean, she might not be alright with the OnlyFans thing. It made me pause and rethink things a little more. I was starting to realize I wouldn't become super rich off this. There's no get-rich-quick scheme. It's all just scams. Still, I knew I had a sweet deal with Creeper. I figured I only felt uncomfortable at times given the circumstances. I'm not homophobic, but I figured it just felt weird sometimes because what I was doing didn't really align with my own sexuality. Creeper began getting possessive though. I'd be in work and he'd spam me with messages asking where I was and when I was coming back. Well, I stupidly told him I had a day job and to just wait until the evening. I thought this was flirty and therefore a good response, but in hindsight it was dumb of me. He demanded to know where I worked and began asking me personal questions all about my real life. He asked if I was gay, asked if I was bisexual, if I had a girlfriend, did I have a wife, what age was I, etc. I refused to tell him anything personal. I didn't want to admit to being straight in case that bothered him, and he didn't need to know anything else. He offered me money in exchange for me telling him these things, but I said no, and I tried to direct the conversation away, basically saying wouldn't he rather spend money on another video than learning about me. I think I pissed him off because he stopped messaging me. I wasn't sure if he would come back. I carried on as usual, but an entire month passed and it was radio silence. I was posting less on OnlyFans because I was starting to go off it. I wasn't struggling as much now thanks to the extra cash I got, especially creepers. I wasn't an idiot, and I saved as much as I could, never splurging it on anything unnecessary. Well, as if on cue, Creeper came back. He simply said hi, and sure enough, he wanted more audios. This time though, he asked me to tell him I loved him and that I would never leave him. He said that he wanted me to speak from the heart and tell him he was the love of my life, etc. I decided to put my foot down and tell him this was going way too far. He responded that he'd give me all his money, but I realized I'd had enough. Creeper was being, well, a creeper. I told him no, and he immediately stopped responding and unsubbed. I didn't feel anything. I kept my Instagram up and kept posting my normal stuff. It was just selfies, nothing sexual. One day I got a DM on there, and I immediately thought, shit, it was the Creeper. The username was very different, but he had messaged me on there demanding to know why I'd broken up with him. I was so confused, and I messaged back like, what? I asked how he found me, and he ignored me. I did advertise the OnlyFans on Insta stories, but I thought that he found me via Reddit. I don't know. I told him he was insane, and I blocked him. A few days later, I was receiving comments under my photos, even photos from the year before, and it was all caps, some dude screaming at me. This person was calling me names and just generally insulting me. I clicked on the profile button, it was all blank. Yet I had a feeling it was the Creeper. I blocked that account too, but more and more kept popping up. Then a profile popped up that began posting videos of me taking from my OnlyFans. The caption on it was rambling about how I needed to be exposed as a gold digger and an asshole. I knew it was the Creeper. He was tagging my followers and I freaked out. I reported the accounts to Instagram and they were taken down. I immediately deleted mine. I still didn't tell anyone and I lived in stress for a few months afterwards. I was on edge, waiting for a family or friend to ask why my dick was on their timeline, but it never happened. Still, it doesn't matter how long passes, I'll never use Instagram again. I deleted the OnlyFans, and I've never made an Instagram again. I'm still on Facebook, but it's logged down tight. I only have family and friends on there I actually talk to. I've learned some tough lessons, and this situation really made me reevaluate some shit. I know it might not sound bad that I took money off the Creeper, but he offered it up, and I needed it. But I've since realized there are no quick fixes. Despite all of the drama the Creeper brought, at least I was able to save a lot of the cash he gave me. It really helped me tremendously. Things are better for me now. I'm in a better situation. But it was rough, and COVID really fucked us all in many ways. If by any chance the Creeper stumbles across this, I just want to say fuck you to him. We better not cross paths again or I'll go to the police and get him arrested for revenge porn. He's really a freak who needs therapy badly. And to anyone listening, be careful out there because people are nuts and don't fall for money scams. It's always too good to be true, and nothing is worth your safety. The Smiling Man. I'm aware that the title sounds like a horror movie or creepypasta, and if I hadn't lived it, I would think it was. This is one of many stories that I have from working the night shift at a laundromat in a bad area, and it's definitely the freakiest. So for context, my mom took a job years ago at a local laundromat because we knew the owner and needed the extra money. I was around 10 when she got the job, and she allowed me to come with her because she would give me a little allowance for helping her do small tasks. I ended up going with her every night for years, and as I got older, I mainly went to make sure my mom was safe because I was worried about her. We regularly dealt with angry customers refusing to leave, most of which were drunk or high, and we had to call the police a few times. My mom was always worried about me tagging along, but I insisted. And to this day, I still can't say I regret it. A lot of good came out of it, mainly the work experience, and that made up for how intense it could be. I have a lot of interesting stories from that time, but this one takes the cake for the most horrifying, and it took place when I was about 12. Being the young and dumb kid that I was, I designated myself the job of chasing people off when it was closing time. We would have people parking behind the building pretty regularly, so I would walk to the side of the building and start yelling that they were now trespassing and I'd call the cops if they didn't leave. I feel that this is important to bring up because I now realize that I let any shady person hanging around the building at night know of my presence, and that's a dangerous thing to do when you're a 12-year-old girl. I was blissfully unaware that anything could happen to me, until one night when we showed up to find that the door lock had been broken. My mom had unlocked the building that morning, so it wasn't like this was a break-in attempt since it had been unlocked all day. We were a bit shaken up, but my mom texted her boss to let him know about it, and just told me to tell her if I saw anyone pull up. After about 30 minutes, I finished my few tasks and sat down to draw on my sketchbook. I had barely been set down for a few minutes when I had heard the door swing open, which startled me because normally people just knock when they see the very obvious close sign. My mom noticed it too and yelled out that we were closed. I heard an older man's voice respond, explaining that he had just come in to use our drink machine. We normally let people in to use our snack and drink machines, so my mom told him he had a few minutes and went back into the closet to grab something. I was sitting about 7 feet away from the drink machine, so I heard him walk up but didn't really pay much attention to him. I continued to draw until I started getting the feeling that someone was watching me, and I realized that I didn't hear this guy put any money in the drink machine. I nervously glanced to my left, and I saw a tall man in his mid-60s staring straight at me with a big smile on his face. I jumped a little, but forced an awkward smile back at him and directed my attention back to drawing. As soon as I did this, I heard what sounded like shuffling, and when I looked over again, he was closer. I didn't know what to do, so I tried just to not look at him, but every time I would look away, he would shuffle closer. His body was still facing the drink machine, but his neck was craned in my direction, and he wouldn't stop smiling and staring. I began shaking and panicking, and my eyes were darting back and forth between him and the closet door while I tried to plan a fast escape. I went to reach for my knife in my bag because I couldn't even imagine this man's intentions and quickly realized that it was not there. I had left my knife at home when I needed it the most, and I was petrified. I decided to just stare back at him despite being terrified and trembling violently, and after what felt like an eternity, he suddenly broke eye contact and yelled to my mom to have a good night before turning around and walking out. Relief hit me instantly, and I tried to calm myself down after what had just happened. I thought I was finally safe and started to get up to go splash some water on my face when I saw him sit down on the bench outside. Panic and dread hit me like a brick, and I sprinted into the closet to hide. I filled my mom in on everything, and she told me to run to the car and she'd get between me and him and then pepper spray him if needed. I did as she told me and ran to the car, and as I passed him, he stood up and began walking toward the car. My mom yelled at him to get away from her car, and his reaction was to try to calmly start a conversation about the make and model of her car, all while staring at me. She ignored him, hopped in the car, locked us in, and started backing up as quickly as she could. I dug down in my seat, but I could still see him standing there, and I know he could see me because I watched as he lifted his hand and then waved me goodbye before walking around to the back of the building and disappearing into the darkness. I felt sick. I couldn't sleep that night, and I never dared set foot anywhere near the back of the building again. So I guess that was a lesson learned. My online stalker. Disclaimer: always report incidents like this to trusted adults and authorities immediately. Please do not handle similar situations the way that I did. It began this summer before I entered high school in 2018 with just innocent messages on Facebook. I never understood why he continued to message me. After a couple of days of him texting 6 to 7 times in a row without a reply, he stated that he was 26 from my hometown but stationed elsewhere in the army, and he had plans to find a young wife to cherish. I made it clear that I was 14 and uninterested. Then I blocked his account. The next day, he made another account calling me baby girl and telling me that I was what he wanted in a wife. This wasn't the first time I had to deal with an older man interested in me. Naively, I muted the chat and moved on with my life. I stopped thinking about him, enjoyed my summer, and then started high school. Everything was going great until the packages started to arrive. First, a necklace with his name on it, then one shaped like a heart. They had receipts and were expensive. I was terrified that he had found my address, so I showed my mom everything. My mom tried to return the gifts, not sure why that was her reaction, but he refused. Showing my mom the messages was the first time that I'd actually ever read any of them. They were weird, and some were about eloping with me when I turned 16. My mom found out that he went to high school with both of my older siblings. My sister recalled him as a weird anime nerd, and he was always friendly towards my brother, also an anime nerd. I ended up blocking a few more accounts and tried to ignore what I thought wasn't that serious of a situation. After this, we never spoke of him again. One afternoon in November of my freshman year, I was in gym class with friends when I had received a call with no ID. My friends told me to pick up, thinking it was a telemarketer or spam that we could mess with. We all heard something along the lines of,
"Hey, I'm waiting outside of gym for you whenever you get done with class."
We thought it was just another friend pranking us, laughed, and just moved on. After class, I had a weird gut feeling and tried leaving through the visitor doors, but the coach told me it wasn't permitted. I walked out, and there he was. He grabbed my throat, jammed his entire mouth against mine, and told me he was disappointed I wasn't wearing the jewelry he got me, then walked away. I sprinted to my theater teacher, the only teacher I trusted, and cried for the rest of the day until convincing my brother to pick me up. I blamed the tears on the recent passing of my grandpa. I kept receiving CDs, mixtapes, songs that he wrote about me, as well as bracelets and cards until COVID began. But I never saw him in person again after that day. The Donut Shop Creeper. I just read another user story about the smiling man at the laundromat, and it instantly transported me back to a similar high school memory. I was about 15 or 16, and my older brother that went to the same high school as me would drive us to school most days of the week when our parents stopped wanting to get up early since we both had zero period that began at 7 a.m. One day on the way to school, we had stopped at a donut shop that was in sort of a remote part of town on a stretch of highway. It was still kind of dark outside before 6:30 a.m. This was in the late 90s or early 2000s before it was common for teenagers to have their own cell phones, so I didn't have a way to call or text. This shop had nothing around it except trees and a stretch of empty land. The parking lot was too big for how small this place was. He didn't park us in the very front spot by the door, and to this day I have no idea why he didn't. He parked about a row and a half from the front and walked in. No one was at the counter, so I watched him wait for service. While he was waiting, my eyes wandered and panned suddenly to a man's face staring daggers at me from one of the tables in the shop. It was very startling, like in movies when they look through binoculars and see someone staring at them through the scope. I immediately looked away and down because it freaked me out. At first, I thought maybe the man was tired and was just kind of spacing out because of how early it was. But I felt his eyes on me after a few minutes, and although I fought myself to look up, I glanced up and he had a creepy smile on his face. He had short bobbed hair like a dude would have had in the 70s. I looked at my brother and it felt like an eternity as he picked the donuts. He had turned around once and I tried to get his attention, but he turned back around to keep choosing. When my brother was talking to the cashier, I noticed the man at the table get up. He never took his eyes off me, and I remember my heart beating hard in my chest as I looked down since I couldn't think of anything else to do. I hoped he would just walk away, but out of the corner of my eye, I noticed he was approaching the truck. My first thought was to reach over and honk the horn as loud as I could, but he was already about one stride away from the driver's side, and I had then noticed the door hadn't auto-locked. It was the kind that had the little pop-up button lock. I only had seconds to choose to lock the door or honk the horn, so I practically leaped over and remember slapping down on the lock button. Not but 2 or 3 seconds later, the man pulled on the door handle. He turned to walk away, but then turned again and tried to pull harder. I then honked the horn to get attention, but I saw my brother had walked to the other side of the counter out of view. After I honked a second time, the guy walked off past the car across the street where it was a bit wooded before the highway resumed. When my brother came back, he asked why I was honking and being impatient because it was still early and we wouldn't even be late. After I told him some creep tried to get in, he drove around the area, but no one was around since it had been like 5 more minutes before he got to the car. Encounter with a killer. I live in Pennsylvania just outside Philly, and the following happened just a few years ago. It was a late November evening and my wife and I were craving hot wings. A quick search brought up a new joint in Royersford, Pennsylvania that had just opened. I put in an online order and zip on by. The man behind the counter, a middle-aged African-American gentleman with a jovial disposition and a hearty laugh. We talked about the Eagles while he got my food ready. I thanked him and left. A few months later, he's on the news for killing his business partner, apparently over a money dispute. She had funds and he wanted them for a new location, but she refused. He buried her out in an industrial area and parked her car elsewhere. The police found evidence of him being in her car, several failed attempts at access to her Cash App and Venmo account, evidence of a struggle in her home, and before long, Chicken Wing Guy was arrested, tried and convicted of his business partner's murder. I didn't connect it until later that this was the same guy after an article named the business he owned, the very restaurant I got wings at those few months prior. The wings weren't all that good either that I recall. Don't ever tell strangers you're traveling alone. Now that I, a 23-year-old female, am back from Germany, I've had some time to think over the events of my trip. But it's hard to think positively considering what happened to me the last night in Stuttgart, and I'd like a place to talk about it. I'd spent about 2 weeks traveling Germany for the Euros, and considering how many fellow Scotland fans were over for the games, I never felt completely alone, despite being a solo traveler in a foreign country. I guess I became too naive in how I trusted the older groups of Scots who'd buy me drinks and chat with me all night about where they're from, who they knew. Just typical Scottish chats. I let my guard down. That last night in Stuttgart happened like most other nights in Germany. I'd be by myself and would get noticed by a group of older men or women who'd inquire as to who I was with. When they heard I was alone, they'd remark at how brave I was as a good-looking lassie, being here all by myself. I'd then be integrated in the group, drink with them, celebrate with them, and that night cry with them after Scotland lost. Determined to enjoy my last night, I said goodbye to my new friends and donned on a short white dress draped in my Scotland flag and went out looking for a good place to drink and dance with strangers I'd never meet again. I met a few people that night, but it was while I was alone that I met him. "That bag's bigger than you are," I heard as a jolly older man wandered over to me. It was true. I had my rucksack with me that night. "Where's your boyfriend to carry it for you?" "Not sure yet. Still deciding if he's going to be German or Scottish," I quipped back with a smile. Most of my interactions would start this way, with a friendly interaction resulting in an offer to come drink with their group. and after offering to take me to a nearby Irish pub to drink with him and his family, I graciously accepted and we began walking. He was over-exaggerating how incredible he thought I was for doing this alone, bowing to me and excitedly telling passers-by how I was by myself and how brave it was. I would smile awkwardly and change the subject. I wish I could say alarm bells were ringing, but they weren't. After all, he was just a wee Scottish grandpa, one of the many I'd met that night. He began prodding me if I had somewhere to sleep tonight, remarking how they had a room in their hotel if need be.
I wouldn't force myself on you or anything.
I froze. It was so unexpected. I truly looked at him for the first time since I'd met him. He was a relatively short man, taller than me with a larger build and wrinkles to match the white hair that was poking out from underneath his Scotland cap. He began quickly explaining how he knew I'd be cautious about that sort of thing, being a smart girl, that I could trust him, but again reiterated that he wouldn't force himself on me. I laughed nervously as all the beer I'd drank earlier seemed to drain from my body, and I began taking in my surroundings. Where did you say your family were again?
Just in an Irish pub up this hill. So like I was saying.
I didn't really pay much attention to him. We were still on the populated main street of Stuttgart, but the numbers were dwindling the further we went. My ears pinged an alert to my brain, signaling I had just missed something important or horrifying. So I mustered up a smile and politely asked, "What did you say? Sorry."
That I'm vegetarian because I killed my 44th man in a vegetable field. Oh, I've been deployed in loads of countries. The first 6 lives I took were in Ireland.
My blood ran cold. I'm a descendant of Irish immigrants who fled to Scotland to escape the brutality of the Troubles in Ireland. Did this man kill my family?
Killed 12 in Iraq.
I could only listen to parts of his ramblings as I began desperately planning my escape, locking eyes with every person that walked past. There weren't many. We had almost reached the top of the main street now.
Why are you so tense all of a sudden?
The words brought me back to the conversation.
You know, I can read you like a book. I'm doing this all for you, see? I want to protect you. And Molly, I can guarantee you right now you don't realize how much danger you're actually in.
I felt a gentle tap on my shoulder, spinning around to see a young German man smiling at me. He motioned to my flag. "I love Scotland. Is there anywhere to eat around here?" I blurted out, staring at him, praying I'd turn around and the old man would be gone. Brief confusion crossed the German's face before the old man began rapidly jumbling up the sentence.
Sprechen Sie Deutsch?
In an attempt to sound as if he was speaking German. "Essen," I whispered. The young man pointed in the direction we had just walked from. "There's a McDonald's down there." I turned back to the old man whose look I could only describe as emotionless, as if he was staring through me like I was no longer there. I felt another cold shiver before smiling. "I'm gonna go grab something to eat, but I'll meet you in the Irish pub later." As if snapping back to his jolly self, the man quipped,
"Now don't be like that. I'm off to a rave just now. I'm playing at it. You don't want to miss it."
"I'll catch you later," I smiled. The man's face again dropped into a blank stare before he turned and walked off. I think the German man called after me, but I didn't hear him. I kept my head down and walked wherever my feet wanted to take me. I couldn't think, only walk. I don't know how I got to the train station nor how I got to the hostel. There were no Irish pubs in Stuttgart, or at least not in that direction. So I guess I'm going to end my story with this. To all solo female travelers, never ever say you're traveling alone. The Goblin Mask. I've been lurking on this sub for a while and really enjoy reading people's experiences. I recalled a story of my own from my childhood I had mostly forgotten. Here it is. I'm a 36-year-old male, and my parents divorced when I was around 4 to 5 years old. During and after the divorce, my brother, who we'll call Chris, my mom and I moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment townhouse. Now, this is not the nice townhouse you may imagine. It wasn't a complete shithole per se, but they were older, built in the 60s, and this was the 1990s, and in a rougher part of town. Something a single mother with 2 kids could swing. The layout of the apartment is important to the story, so bear with me. When you walk in the front door, the kitchen is immediately to your left, and there's a short entrance hallway in front of you. The kitchen has an open countertop area that looks into the dining spot for a table and a split-level living room and den area that also had sliding glass doors leading to the backyard. There was a playground there. And the hallway entrance again, on the right is a staircase leading up to my mom's and my brother's rooms. One day after school, my brother and I were playing out in the backyard on the playground, doing our kid stuff, when my mom told us that she wanted to go check the mail. The mailboxes of the apartments are located at the front entrance, which is on the opposite side of the complex from us. Naturally, me being 5 and Chris 9, my mom didn't want to leave us alone, especially since it was about dark outside. We came inside and got ready to leave. On the way out, I remember my mom asking Chris if he had closed and locked the sliding glass door. Chris said he had. Cut to where we're back from the mailroom. It's maybe been about 20 to 30 minutes max. It's hard to recall fully, but my mom unlocks the apartment door, and I'm lingering in the car for some reason or another. Chris doesn't notice I'm not in the apartment yet, and on the stairs leading to the bedrooms on the right, he sees someone's feet at the top of the landing, as if someone were running to hide. Thinking they're me, he doesn't think something's off. Chris goes to the kitchen, and I actually go upstairs directly into our bedroom to get ready for the bed and bath in the bathroom. My mom is at the table in the dining area near the split-level living area downstairs. While I'm completely clueless getting ready for bed in the bathroom, Chris from downstairs keeps hearing someone walking around in my mom's bedroom. Now, I had a bad habit when I was this age of going through people's stuff. Not maliciously. I was barely 5. Just curious, whatever. And Chris, thinking I'm being a nosy bastard going through all of her mom's jewelry, runs upstairs to catch me in the act and get me in trouble. Well, Chris runs up the stairs, sprints across the hall to my mom's bedroom, and throws himself stomach first onto the bed. When he looks up, he sees a tall, slender man with a bright green goblin latex Halloween mask on, and he's holding up a large knife that he swiped from the kitchen. My brother sits silently in shock as the man in the goblin mask raises one finger to the mouth, indicating for him to be quiet, and in true form for my brother, he screamed bloody murder for our mom. Now, I have heard things going on, but I have no idea and I'm not aware of what's happening. I've gotten my big oversized sleeve shirt and I'm going downstairs to have a glass of milk before bed. When Chris screamed, the man ran downstairs and encountered my mom, who immediately jumped into action. Our baseball gear was in the living room, and my mom grabbed a bat and started fighting this man in our house while he was taking swipes at her with the knife. I first noticed what was happening when I've come downstairs to the kitchen, pulled up a step stool to reach the counter and pour a glass of milk. And that's when I see over the bar, the guy pushes my mom off the steps into the split-level living room, landing on her back. She starts swinging the bat wildly, trying to make any contact with it, and she does. I'm glued to this image, truly frozen in place. Not scared, just so young that you can't fully process what you're seeing. The man finally runs toward the front door, which is right by the kitchen. I'm mid-pouring my glass of milk, frozen, milk continuing to spill out all over the counter and floor. He stops and turns directly to me, and in that green goblin mask with the knife, screams a primal deep sound of rage and frustration, and then slams the door so hard the whole place shakes. I continued standing on my stool, pouring my milk everywhere, frozen for, I don't know, what could have been a second but felt so long. I don't remember what happened after that, but all of the parts I've relayed are very clear to me. Moral of the story: lock your doors, and don't just assume that you did. Actually do it. The Crazy Ex. Hello everyone. I'm very new to posting here, so please bear with me. I wanted to share my story that has occurred over the past 5 years. The story is about me, currently 20 years old, and my stalker ex who's 23. The start of our relationship. 2019 to 2021, 5 years ago, I met my ex. I'll call him Alex for my own safety. In early to mid 2019, I came across Alex's profile on Instagram, and I recognized him as a student who attended the same high school as me. I always thought he was attractive, so I followed him on Instagram, and to my surprise, he actually responded to one of my stories. We started messaging on Instagram back and forth, and then both of us quickly found out that we liked each other. We started calling each other and sleeping on the phone. One night while I fell asleep on the phone with Alex, I heard his voice coming from the phone, whispering something like, "I would totally R-word you," and things along that manner. I thought I was just hearing things, so I brushed it off and thought I was just dreaming. Eventually, me and him started dating and going on dates. Everything was going pretty well, except for the fact that when he would kiss me, he would bite me extremely hard to the point that it would make me bleed. I told him multiple times not to do it, but he would always continue. A couple of months into dating, a girl had made a video on Instagram claiming he was a cheater, but he denied it to me that he even knew this girl, and I believed him. 10 months of dating went by, and a friend sent me a screenshot of him being active on Tinder. I immediately broke up with him after that. A couple of months later, I had started dating someone new. During this relationship with my new partner, Alex would blow up my phone with messages and calls. I decided to block him. He then started driving past my house every single day. At this point, I had my first job, and he would eventually show up there too. I even moved jobs and he found me there as well. Now, getting back together, which was 2021 to 2023, the situation eventually died down. Randomly out of the blue, I get a flower delivery of pink roses. It had Alex's name on the card attached, but nothing written. Being the stupid 17 to 18-year-old senior I was in high school, I actually unblocked him and thanked him. He asked to hang out, and I willingly went to hang out with him soon after we started texting. My 17-year-old self thought it was cool to be dating a hot, well-known older boy, so I eventually fell back into Alex. After a couple of times of hanging out, we had started dating again. I eventually lost my V card to Alex, and we started regularly sleeping with each other. One day he texted me saying he had a surprise for me. Then he sent me an iCloud file. I opened the file, and it was a video of us having sex. I had no idea he recorded us having sex. I couldn't even consent. I was 17 at the time and he was 20. Again, stupid 17-year-old me stayed with him regardless of the red flags. Eventually, our relationship became sexually and physically abusive. One night, he sexually assaulted me while intoxicated and unconscious and left bruising on my head and abdomen. A couple of days after that, I decided enough was enough and I broke up with him. Now for the stalking. This was around 2023 to 2024. Immediately following the breakup, he would constantly text and call me. He would beg for me to see him. I kept denying, but he kept going. He would threaten to come into my house in the middle of the night while I was asleep. This happened for a couple of months. During this time, I met someone new and we started dating. I was having trouble with my mom, and my new partner asked me to move in with him. Somehow Alex found out where me and my new partner were living, so he started showing up at our place. We documented everything from our cameras and ended up filing a restraining order against Alex. We got granted a temporary order until our hearing. Our hearing day came, and the judge extended the temporary order to let things cool down for 6 months, and if he breaks the order, the judge will grant a long-term order at the next hearing. Within days of extending the temp order, Alex violated it by parking in front of my house on multiple occasions. I called the cops multiple times, but never even gave him a warning. One day while I was working, I got a call from my local police department that Alex tried purchasing a firearm, which violates our order. They just warned him not to do it again and had to let me know for my safety. Obviously, knowing your crazy ex has tried purchasing a firearm is crazy in itself. The following days, he would follow me to work and stand in front of my boyfriend's truck in the early hours of the morning. This is the most current and fleeing. In 2024, He would start tailgating me on my way to work or swerve in front of me in his car. Me and my boyfriend moved somewhere else, but still in the same city. Somehow Alex still managed to find us. My boyfriend decided that if the cops weren't going to help us, then we would need to leave the state. We ended up packing up everything in the middle of the night and driving a state over to where my boyfriend's family lives. I've been here for about 2 months. Me and my boyfriend found good jobs, and we plan on leasing our own apartment soon. It's been peaceful for the most part. However, I still hear about what Alex does back home. He still tells everyone that we're still together, and he even posts pictures of me on his Instagram. My story is still ongoing. The high school stalker. This incident happened back when I was a sophomore in high school. I'm now a 27-year-old female, but I would like to keep myself anonymous for the sake of the story for reasons you'll understand. Our school was notorious for getting transfer students, so I didn't pay much mind when 2 new students arrived at the beginning of that year. They were twins who, for this story, I will call David and Kyle. Right from the start, everyone could tell that there was something off about these two. They kept to themselves, would whisper everything, and were always glaring at everyone, teachers and students alike. Have you ever met someone who gave off the vibe that they were going to be a serial killer one day? Yeah, that was these two. Maybe a couple of months into the school year, I noticed that one of the twins, Kyle, seemed to be paying more attention to me than usual. He would hover by my locker, sit closer to me in the cafeteria, and would always be staring at me whenever he thought that I wouldn't notice. Everything seemed to take a turn when my best friend thought it would be funny to ask Kyle to give me a hug while we were eating lunch. Even though I was clearly uncomfortable, my friend did not let up, and I ended up getting that incredibly awkward hug. From that day forward, things started to get much worse. As the weeks went by, the stalking got worse, and I was starting to feel incredibly paranoid. Even a couple of my teachers noticed what was happening and tried their best to keep me as far away from Kyle as they could. I attended a very religious private school, and that came with the typical misogyny and unfair treatment. Girls were suspended for wearing tank tops, having hair above their shoulders, and I even saw a couple of girls get expelled for being pregnant. But as they always said, boys will be boys. Anyway, homecoming was coming up, and all of us were getting excited about our dates and picking out our dresses for the dance. I decided to go with my best friend because neither of us wanted to deal with finding a date. I don't know why I didn't see this coming, but Kyle stopped me in front of the cafeteria one day. He got on one knee with a rose and asked me to be his date for homecoming. Thank God my best friend was there when he asked, and then informed him that we would be going together so I didn't have to deliver an awkward rejection. Kyle said nothing. He just got up and walked off without looking at anyone. I felt terrible. As creepy as he was, I never wanted to hurt anyone's feelings. The stalking seemed to die down for a few days, which I was thankful for. I thought that maybe he finally got the hint and I wouldn't have to worry about all this anymore. I was very wrong. Now, instead of trying to talk to me or sit close to me, he began filming me using his phone. Every time I would look over, I could see the red light on his phone, and it was always pointed towards me. I never even had the thought to bring this to the attention of a teacher, because what would they even do? Boys will be boys after all, right? It was the Friday night of homecoming. There was the typical football game, and I was a cheerleader. Kyle and David had never been to a football game before, and I was extremely thankful for that. But tonight, to my horror, I looked up at the audience and saw Kyle in the stands, giving me that same creepy stare and holding up his phone with that same red light. He wasn't even trying to hide it. Even my coach noticed, and he escorted me off the field and to my car after the game, which I am thankful for, don't get me wrong. Still, this was the third adult that had seen him do this, and no one stepped up to help me. I felt stuck. I was so excited to go home that night and be somewhere that I felt safe. How wrong I was. After eating dinner and taking a quick shower, I finally got to sleep after a stressful day. I woke up in the morning to the creepiest voicemail I have ever received. I was horrified. I have no idea how Kyle even got my number. The voicemail went something like this.
Hey, it's Kyle. I just wanted to say great job last night. I know I haven't been to any of your games, but I'm glad that I got to see you at this one, and I'll be coming to every single game from now on. If you ever want to talk to me, I can only call when my parents are gone on Saturday mornings because I'm not allowed to talk to girls on the phone. Anyway, I just wanted to say great job again and thank you for the amazing videos I was able to get. Okay, see you at the next game. Bye.
I didn't even know what to do. I was too afraid to tell my parents as they had the same mentality as the authorities at the school. Instead, I showed the voicemail to my senior friends on the following Monday to get their thoughts about it. They all just thought it was hilarious and said that he probably meant no harm. Everyone around me thought this whole situation was so funny that I tried to do the same despite the growing concern. Then one day, it was all over. No more stalking, no more videos, no more creepy stares. The twins just disappeared. One day in the middle of the year, they just didn't come back to school, and they were never seen again. No one had any answers as to why. No trace of them could be found online, and since they kept to themselves, no one had contact with them or their family. It was like they were never there, except for me. I knew they were there, and it caused me trust issues for many years to come, and even to this day, I don't 100% trust anyone that I don't really know. To the creepy twins, especially Kyle, I really hope that you didn't become the serial killers everyone thought you would be. The psychotic bully. This took place way back when I was in middle school. I admit I was a total nerd. Braces, glasses, special shoes, the whole 9 yards. I wasn't bullied too badly, and everybody at school knew each other from previous grades, so I actually had a lot of good friends. My last year of middle school, however, I was bullied mercilessly by a new kid. He was huge compared to the rest of the students in that grade. Some people said he had even been held back a few years. Others said his whole family was full of wrestlers and they were all just that big. I tried keeping my head down, ignoring his cruel jokes and rallying others to join him. It seemed the more I ignored his verbal bullying, the more physical things started to get. All my friends seemed to turn on me, joking and laughing at me behind my back. Those that still hung out with me started to ignore me, probably because they didn't want to face the new kid's wrath. Many times throughout the day, he would sneakily attack me, kicking out my legs when my hands were full, slamming me into lockers, stealing my backpack and stuffing it into the toilets. Every time an incident occurred, I told the front office or I told a hall duty person, but all they did was make an incident report, and the bullying continued. I just kept telling myself, the year's almost over. I won't have to deal with this much longer. I had learned how to get around the school without running into the bully, but this turned me into a hermit. I no longer really had friends. I spent most of my time either at the library or computer lab by myself, and to keep the bully and his minions from torturing me, I asked all of my teachers if I could sit at the front of the class closest to the door. Eventually, the bullying took a turn for the worse. For a few months, I hadn't had to deal with the constant bullying, and unfortunately, I let my guard down. I had to use the restroom really badly and had no choice but to use the main restroom in the busiest part of the school. The bathroom was busy, so I used the last urinal at the end. As I was relieving myself, I could hear people coming and going from the bathroom until I noticed I didn't hear anybody anymore. As I began to turn my head to see where everybody had gone, a massive hand had grabbed the back of my head and slammed my face into the tile wall. Instantly, I felt my nose gush blood and my teeth bit into my lip as my head rolled back and my glasses fell off my face. My glasses had been cracked right on the bridge. As I watched them slowly fall to the floor, I was then kicked in the back into the urinal. The flushing mechanism struck me in the neck and chin, splitting open my chin. I was dazed and wobbling. The bully then spun me around and then threw me into the wall. I slowly slid to the ground with my legs sprawled out. He then started laughing and pointing at me, saying saying I pissed myself. Of course, my pants were wet from being slammed into the urinal. So was my shirt. But my shirt was wet from a mix of blood, urinal water, and maybe even piss. He just stood there laughing as if he just heard the best joke ever. I realized at that moment that nobody had left the bathroom. Everybody was just standing there staring at me, mouths wide open looking at the bloody carnage on the floor that was me. The realization and embarrassment of everybody staring at me snapped me back into reality. As the bully was bent over laughing, I quickly scrambled to my feet defensively. I swung my backpack around to my chest, partially to cover myself in my drenched clothes and partially to protect myself from the bully. Once he noticed I was on my feet, he stopped laughing. Blood was dripping down my nose and onto my backpack. The bully looked at me up and down. He then turned his head to the other kids in the bathroom and then said, "Look at this guy. He takes a lick and just keeps on ticking." Then he looks back at me. "You think you're pretty tough, don't you? You think you're tougher than me?" I didn't say anything. I didn't think anything I said would help the situation. "Hey!" he screamed at me, and I jumped. He laughed at me again. "Oh, I thought you were a big old tough guy. You're just a scaredy cat. Hey, look at this guy. He's so scared he's pissing himself." As his head was turned, I thought maybe I could rush by him or maybe he'd just let me go. He stuck his arm out, stopping me. "Did I say you could leave?" I looked at the other kids in the bathroom, praying that somebody would at least get help. As he slammed me back against the wall with one arm, I could hear the bathroom door open, and then people started scouring out. In my head, I thought, yes, finally somebody is going to get help. I just have to deal with this asshole for a bit longer. But when I looked at the bully, his eyes seemed to change. There was nothing in those eyes. In my head, I thought, this guy's going to kill me. He doesn't care. He's going to kill me and nobody will even say anything because they're too scared of him. He kicked at me and hit my backpack, pushing me against the wall again. I realized there was now nobody in the bathroom. Everybody had left except me and the bully. Nobody would have stopped him from killing me anyways. He kept kicking in my backpack and pushing me against the wall over and over. I thought he must be getting tired, and any minute now a teacher or yard duty person will come through the door. But I also realized that at the same time with this guy who up until this moment I thought was just a student, a new kid, a bully was going to kill me. Just then, something inside me changed. I was never really a timid person or shy or meek. But the more I'd gotten bullied, I started doing just those things. I hadn't really realized all that this bully had taken from me. I don't know if it was fight or flight, adrenaline or what, but I pushed my backpack in front of me and started charging the bully. He threw a fist right into my face and probably broke my nose or even worse, but my momentum carried me, and using my backpack as a battering ram slammed into the bully and we both toppled onto the floor. I tried pushing myself up off my backpack, but as I tried, the bullying kept punching me in my lower side and side of my chest. The punches didn't really hurt, but it kept me from getting my feet from under me. Every time I pushed myself up and off my backpack and bully, I kept pushing myself down as hard as I could, hoping it would be enough to hurt him so I could get away. The bully grabbed my arm, and in one swift move flipped me over so that now I was on my back and he was on top of me. He began to cock his arm back, so I covered my face. The punch landed on my ribs, and as I instinctively moved to protect my ribs, he punched me on the side of my face. I was in a losing battle. I could taste the blood in my mouth, and every blow to my face and ribs sent a convulsion throughout my body. I started throwing my hands into his face, not really able to get a good hit, but distracting him enough that he was now defending himself. The bully kept trying to grab my hands and pin my arms, but my arms were covered in blood and sweat and probably piss, which made it difficult for him to pin my arms. Wildly swinging at him, the bully simply sat back while still on top of me, and I could no longer reach him. So I started to thrust my body, trying to throw him off me. Then I felt the pressure of the world slam my throat into the ground and push and squeeze. He was choking me with both hands and pushing down on my throat as hard as he could. I opened my eyes to see the bully. His eyes were now completely glassed over. I knew I was going to die. With my left hand, I tried pushing against his chest just to let a little air into my lungs. And with my right hand, I started digging through the pencil pouch in the front of my backpack. I grabbed what I thought was a pen or pencil and swung it at the bully. I felt it make contact, maybe too much contact. I tried pulling the pen back, but it was stuck. The bully's hand went limp and he fell forward but off me. I scrambled away from the bully, but stayed sitting on the ground struggling to breathe. I looked over at the bully to see that I had driven the point of the pen into his neck almost halfway deep. The bully just laid on the ground and his body started shaking, going into convulsions. I was too tired to move. My whole body hurt. The bathroom floor was covered in blood. My blood. My shirt was soaked in it. The bully kept reaching out his hands. His hands were covered into blood too. My blood. I tried yelling out for help, but only a squeak came out. I could feel the right side of my face start to swell up from the repeated punches, and no matter how I tried to sit on the floor, my back and sides really hurt. So I just sat there, trying to get as much precious air into my lungs as I could, and watched as this bully or would-be killer dragged himself along the bathroom floor. I don't know how much time had passed or if I had passed out, but I realized I was hearing screaming and yelling. The bathroom was now filled with adults, teachers, and hall duty people. The bully had dragged himself to the other side of the bathroom away from me, but had stopped there. As some larger hall duty people were checking on him and noticing the pin sticking halfway out of his neck, a gaggle of female teachers were tending to me. One of the teachers I recognized as my last period English teacher. She looked at me and our eyes locked. She looked at my nose and face and gently tilted my head back to look at my neck. "Jesus," she said under her breath, but audible enough for me to hear. I gave her a little smile, and she told the other teacher to give her some wet paper towel to clean my face. She gently wiped the blood from my cheeks and mouth, being careful around my nose, but it still hurt. She started to wipe the blood from my neck, but it was still too tender, and I pushed her hand away and shook my head. My face was now really swollen, and it looked like I was a squirrel. They tried to lift me to my feet, but the pain in my side was too much, so they left me on the ground and called 911 for both me and the bully. EMS showed up soon after. They hoisted the bully into a stretcher. He was still alive, but twisted into a half-moon shape. The bathroom door opened as they left, and I could hear the gasps and, "Oh wow, whoa damn, what happened to him?" of the students in the hallway. While the EMS were looking over me, poking and prodding and asking me questions that I could only nod and shake my head slowly at, they brought another stretcher for me. But for some reason, I stood up on my own, winching from the pain. But I felt victorious? No, that wasn't the right word. I felt like I had just survived a bear attack, or what I assume a bear attack felt like, and thought the last few feet to the stretcher was like me crawling around and dragging myself out of the woods. I rolled onto the stretcher and closed my eyes to the bright fluorescent lights of the hallway. I heard a few of the girls gasping, even crying, probably at the sight of me on the stretcher covered in blood. Now with some more room to work with, the EMS people gently put my neck into a brace. As my head was lifted, I could see a few of my fellow students waving at me, some fist pumping, a few of them whooping and cheering. I didn't feel like I won that fight though. If anything, I cheated. Like I said, I felt like a survivor, not a winner. The gas station weirdo. I would like to begin my story by giving a little bit of context about myself. I'm a 21-year-old woman, and this incident recently took place at my university before my graduation. For the sake of anonymity, I don't want to share the name of my university, but I will say that it's in the Midwest of the United States. I worked at the front desk of my university student center. Since I held a management position there, I was often kept in the loop about lots of different things happening in the building. The student center is open to the public, and I have some pretty funny and weird stories regarding some of the people who came into the building. This story specifically is about someone I never wish to meet again. For the sake of this narration, let's call him Gus. Gus first appeared in our building around December of 2023. He was clearly an old man, tall and lanky with white hair and a beard. He always wore the same all-black outfit and got from place to place using his bicycle. Gus seemed to be homeless and had a routine of coming into the student center, buying a coffee and a snack, and sleeping most of the day away in one of our more secluded seating areas. Not too long after he first made his appearance, I came in to cover the next shift at the front desk. Another female coworker of mine who had been working the shift before mine asked if I had noticed Gus around our building. After I said yes, she reported to me that he had been acting odd towards her. She claimed that he had asked to borrow a pair of scissors, and when she handed them to him, he made a comment about how sharp they were, and that he hadn't held something this sharp for a while. This obviously made my coworker feel a little concerned, so she reported this concern to our supervisor as well. She got back to us saying our university's police department had already been getting several minor complaints about him reporting similar creepy behavior. However, university police knew that there was not anything criminal about these reports. Within the next month, I continued to see Gus during every single shift that I worked, but he didn't seem to be bothering anyone. Still, various other staff members in the building would come to the desk and ask me if I'd seen him, warning me that he was a creep. University police also seemed to stop by the desk during my shifts, sometimes more than once, to inquire about where he was and if I'd heard anything new about his behavior. Since I was friendly with most of these officers, I inquired further about why everyone was so concerned about him. Although he stared when he walked by me, he never confronted me or acted out of the ordinary. The officer I was speaking to informed me that Gus had recently been released from prison and that he had committed sex offenses towards minors. They were concerned about his extensive history and were looking for the first excuse they could find to kick him off campus. As the months went on, this continued. Gus would continue to stare, and I even saw him riding around my neighborhood a few blocks away from my place of work on several occasions. The police continued to monitor him as he got more and more reports about his odd comments and behaviors. Things finally got interesting in early April of 2024. As the weather warmed up, our student center was populated with more and more people, including lots of young college girls dressed in shorts and crop tops. It didn't take long before Gus was caught taking pictures of girls' shorts, and he was put on a trespass warning by university police. What this basically means is that he was not allowed on the property for the duration of the trespass warning. University police came to update me on this during one of my many closing shifts shortly after this occurred. They told me that if I saw Gus, I needed to call them immediately, because he had been part of an incident that earned him yet another trespass warning. The officer would not give me details about this incident, but he would give me some details about the incident that got his initial trespass warning. Apparently, he got close to the girls he was filming by pretending he had dropped something on the ground next to their feet, and then he would get on the floor and begin filming them. When talking to the police, he told them that girls who dress like that deserve and want that kind of attention. Gross, I know. Not even 2 hours into my shift, Gus strolled right past me, staring as usual. I locked into his stare this time around, and I picked up the phone to call university police as soon as he was out of sight. They arrived within minutes and gave him another trespass warning, but this time it would be in place for 2 years. If he broke it, he would be arrested immediately. He saw me talking to the university police as the issue was being sorted, but I wasn't worried because I was sure I wouldn't have to see him again. And while I wish that was the case, it just wasn't true. About 2 weeks later, I stopped at my local gas station in the morning to pick up a coffee. This gas station was only a block away from my place of work. My hair was wet as I had just showered, but I didn't think much of it because I knew this would be a quick trip in and out. As soon as I got back to the freezers that held the iced coffees, my heart dropped as I saw Gus standing right there at the next freezer over. I refused to look at him, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw his whole body turn to face me. My heart immediately began to race, but I was banking on the fact that he might not recognize me outside of my uniform. I grabbed my coffee and quickly jumped into the line at the front of the store. I thought if I kept my back to the creep, he would be less likely to recognize me or try to engage with me. Dread washed over me as I heard him step up behind me, way too close. This dude was not giving me any personal space at all. He reached over my shoulder to pick up some snacks at the display next to my head, pretending to be interested in grabbing something. I could smell his BO and tried to inch up closer to the people in front of me. Suddenly, I heard something drop to the floor behind me. Just like that, Gus's tall body was crouched on the floor next to my ankles, picking up something that he had accidentally dropped. At this point, my fear was turning to anger, and I thought all about the scary stories I'd listened to before that prepared me for a moment like this. As he stood back up, I turned around and locked eyes with him, putting on the bitchiest face I could muster. "Excuse me," I barked at him, and he returned my stare and took one small shuffle backwards. At this point, it was my turn to pay, and as I approached the register, I felt Gus step right back up to where he was, basically against my back. Before I could even react, I heard this creep sniffing in my ear. He was seriously sniffing my wet hair while I was trying to pay for my drink. As I whirled around, the cashier quickly asked me if I knew this man. I loudly shouted, "No, ma'am, I do not know him. I don't know why he's so close to me." The cashier, who was a female smaller than me, was clearly uncomfortable, and she apologized, saying she thought we were together. Gus took 2 large steps backwards as she was saying this, and he had the audacity to laugh.
"Sorry,"
he said, putting his hands up in a mocking gesture.
"I didn't realize I was too close."
I left the store in a hurry, furious and shaking. He watched me as I peeled out of the lot and onto the street. Over the next 4 days, I saw him 3 different times. Once while I was driving through my neighborhood, once on my walk back from the gym, and finally while I was enjoying a picnic with my friends. On all 3 occasions, he continued to give me that empty stare, but he never approached me again. I'm not entirely sure if me running into him over and over was a coincidence or not, but either way, I was happy to move away from there after my graduation. I know that the story is not as eventful as many others you've heard, but the feeling of dread that the sight of this man sparks is very real. I have never had something like that happen to me in public before. I hope to never see Gus again. Just for context, I'm a teenage female and still attending school, so I work the same night shifts on Friday and midday weekend shifts every week. Around 5 months ago, I served a man who had come in with his family during the weekend. He was really rude to me and my coworker, constantly demanding extra stuff, claiming the food wasn't fresh, and was also very strict to his family. He yelled at his kids to stand in line and walk to wash their hands, yelling at them if they talked while eating. When he was beginning to leave, he randomly came back to me, guiding his crying daughter to tell me thank you for the food. She was clearly upset and embarrassed, trying to hide her face. I didn't see him again until maybe 5 weeks ago. Every Friday when I work the night shift by myself, he comes in to buy food but eats in the store by himself. My other coworker leaves 2 hours before closing, and all I have to do is the last bit of orders and then clean with the store closed and then the lights off. Each time he was being overly nice, but it felt so performative. Like he would smile, give me a compliment, and then his face would drop and wait for my reaction. He creeped me out, but it wasn't any reason for concern until 2 weeks ago. He ate inside again and left. Maybe an hour later, I closed up the store and then cleaned, finishing up at around 11:30 p.m. I left through the back car park and went to the strip of stores across the road since I wanted to go to the bank and further down the street, the laundromat, to wash the aprons since no one had bothered to do it before. When going to the bank, I saw the man again, waiting outside the bank on his phone. Didn't think anything of it. I saw him before and it made sense to me that he was there. I walked right past him without acknowledging him down the street until I noticed him following me. Each time I stopped, so would he. If I randomly turned or crossed the road, he was still there. He always kept a gap between us. I was also doing random stuff to see if he would do the same. When I finally reached the laundromat, he stood in front of the door just watching me. Not really knowing what to do since the laundromat is a long hallway and not wanting to be face to face with him when I came out of the entry, I booked it for the fire escape on the opposite end, which led to an alleyway surrounded by the sides of apartments. It took me ages to walk out of the alleyway until I finally reached the street where I could walk around the block of stores back to the bank and diagonal to the car park. I looked down the street again, and I didn't see him. I told my coworkers and boss about this. I now no longer have the night shift and work Fridays after 4 p.m., and my coworkers have been keeping a lookout, but I haven't seen him since. I've been busy dealing with the wake of a family tragedy since this all happened, but now that things are returning to the new normal, I figured it's a good time to share. So this is what I thought was a nightmare. First, I'll describe the nightmare. It's a very short dream, and it feels like a clear memory just because of how scary it was. I was about 4 or 5 years old, perhaps 6 at most, and my twin brother and I had a bunk bed in a room at the furthest end of the house where we grew up in. The nightmare had me in my bed looking out the window to see a red sky, the kind it gets in the early dawn hours before sunrise, but light still colors the sky. The next and only other thing I remembered in this nightmare is that a man with crazy blue-colored eyes and a bald head appears at the window and stares right at me. The nightmare ends there, but I remember just how much I screamed and screamed about it. I don't know where my brother was at the time when I woke up screaming, and the only thing I could remember from when I woke up was having my mom come and get me and calm me down as she took me to her bedroom down the hall. I only remember that so well because I wondered where my dad was at the time. Fast forward to this May, and my father is in the hospital in the country he lives in Colombia, and my twin brother and our older sister are staying in a hotel about a 5-minute walk away from the hospital he's staying in the ICU at. One day, after a long day of being there for Dad and for the extended family, my siblings and I return to the hotel and sit together to have a couple of beers and just try to relax after all of that. We start discussing things, just trying to unwind, but somehow the discussion of nightmares and dreams come up, and I bring up the above story. Well, without missing a beat, my sister straight up explains that had really happened, that some guy really did look through my window, and that she remembers the whole thing. My sister, who's 5 years older than my brother and I, so this would make her 9 to 10 years old, had her bedroom adjacent to the bedroom that my brother and I shared. Her room faced our lawn and street, while our room faced the neighbor's house and their driveway with a very low fence between the two houses. While she didn't get into too much detail about the days before this nightmare and event, she said that she had been followed by a bald man in a truck as she had rode her bike home with some friends a couple of times before. The day immediately before this nightmare was no different, but the man this time actually drove right past the house. At the time, she was a latchkey kid since my brother and I had to go to a special school about 45 minutes away from our hometown for a speech impediment that many twins have, and my mom had to pick us up rather than be home for my sister after school, but she was never home alone for more than an hour. That afternoon and evening was pretty normal as she remembers it. My dad came home from his job. He worked as a part-time cop and worked in a local hardware store. We then all had dinner, did homework, played, and did the usual family things before bed. That night around 12 to 1 a.m., this bald-headed dude had parked down the street at a small industrial park and walked up to our house and tried to get in through my sister's window, which woke her up, and she then screamed when she saw the man nearly opening the window as it wasn't locked. My dad stormed in and tried to shove the guy out or tried to hit him with the nightstick he had. My sister doesn't remember exactly, and this caused the guy to run off, but only for a short time, as he came back a moment later to try and get into the window in my room. He tried opening the window, but it was locked because my mom didn't want my brother and I to open it because our bed was right up against it. My sister said I screamed as loud as I could, and my mom went in to get my brother and I while my dad tried to go after him by running out of the front door to chase him, but to no avail, as the guy hauled ass right through our backyard. The way our backyard was situated had it backed up right against a small rail yard that is part of the aforementioned small industrial park down the street from us. Between our small neighborhood and that rail yard was a very good amount of very dense trees that always made the backyards very, very dark. So my dad didn't want to get attacked by him there. So instead he went back inside to our house, called the police. Then he called our elderly neighbor to make sure they were okay while our mom took care of us kids. This is all my sister could remember from that night herself, as this was a very long time ago. Neither of us could recall anything else after that either, and the story just sort of stops right there. My father sadly passed away in the hospital, so we aren't able to ask him, and given all of that, none of us have really thought to ask our mom yet, but maybe I'll ask her soon. The story goes back to the 90s. I was 7 or 8 and going home from school, a 5-minute walk in a safe district, but there was something waiting for me on my way home that day. I remember a man, a smile, a big hand reaching to me to shake my small one, and 2 meters away there was another man leaning on a car with its door open. I did shake his hand, and I remember him not wanting to let go of my hand. He had started asking questions about school and teachers. I was answering the questions while trying to liberate my hand. Then out of nowhere, my best friend in elementary school of that year showed up, shouted my name, and stood not too close but not far away from watching us. Then the man stopped smiling, let loose of my hand, and went to the car looking frustrated. My friend looked scared and serious. I totally forgot all about this 2 minutes of my life because I didn't know what tragedy I escaped. Then somehow the memories re-emerged after 20 years, and I then understood that it was a kidnapping attempt. Last night I awoke to the unsettling noise of loud banging and my dog's frantic barking. Living alone with my girlfriend, we have grown accustomed to our neighbors' domestic disputes, and I have to call the police often. I stumbled to the bathroom, as the walls there are thin and separated our duplex from theirs. As I approached the bathroom door, the entire house was dark, and a tall shadow was in my bathtub. I wasn't wearing my glasses, and I'm incredibly nearsighted, so I struggled to discern whether the shadow was merely the shower curtain or what it was. Then the shadow spoke. I don't know what he said, but the gut-wrenching panic I felt is still fresh. I screamed and fled back to my bedroom, slamming the door behind me. My girlfriend, now awake and terrified, joined me as I dialed the police. They instructed me to lock the door, but my bedroom doesn't have one. With the banging growing louder and more aggressive, I braced myself against the door, praying that help would arrive in time. To my relief, the police arrived swiftly, in only 5 minutes. When I finally emerged from the bedroom, I found that they had dragged him naked from the bathtub because he had been trying to shower. They were questioning him on my couch while he was handcuffed. He was apparently incredibly drunk and had just wandered into the wrong house. And this was the one night that we forgot to lock the doors. Gotta love it. I came here to tell my story because there are people that go through these types of relationships who are maybe still healing, but I also need some advice myself. I'm a 17-year-old girl, and when I was 14, I really liked older guys, and not guys who were 1 year older than me, but I mean like 3 to 4 years older. That's when I met my ex. He was 17 at the time, and he was a really sweet guy, until he'd started opening up about his mental health and drug addiction. Don't get me wrong, I don't judge him for being mentally unstable, but he never took his prescription and he just threw tantrums all day, verbally abused me, and overall didn't even care about me. I was with him for 2 years until one day he finally blocked me, basically ending our relationship, and I never heard from him again, until 2 months ago, that is. I came home from school one day and I looked into the mailbox because I saw an envelope. It was unusual for us to receive envelopes unless it was a bill, but it wasn't an envelope for bills. It was one meant for letters. I put it in my purse and went inside the house. I went into my room after, and I said hi to my mom and then opened the envelope. There was no return address or anything like that, but my name on the letter caught my attention. I never received letters from anyone, and I was worried to see a signature that I'd recognize on it. I started reading the letter, well, hardly because the writing was awful, but the person who sent it was telling me how they regret letting me go and that they want me back. I thought that one of my friends was playing a stupid prank on me, so I brushed it off and put it in my drawer, just laughing about the situation. Later that night, I was about to go to sleep when an unknown number showed up on my screen. I looked at the screen confused because I rarely ever receive such weird calls from unknown numbers. I didn't really want to pick up, but I thought that maybe it was one of my friends trying to pull one of their pranks on me as usual. I picked up and I heard breathing.
Hello?
I said. No answer.
Beatrice? Are you this bored that you want to pull pranks on me?
Still no answer, just heavy breathing from the other end. All of a sudden, I heard his voice.
Who's Beatrice?
My eyes were wide open and I hung up. I stared at the ceiling in disbelief and I put my phone on silent mode and just went to sleep. I didn't think for 1 second that this phone call was about to be the beginning of my biggest nightmare. I woke up the next morning with several calls from that unknown number and I got a little scared. I opened my phone and saw messages from the same person telling me to pick up and to just talk to them. I tried to ignore it, but the calls and messages continued even after I got to school. When I was outside the school gates and smoking a cigarette with my friend, I got a call again. I answered and gave an upset answer.
Dude, who the hell are you? Why are you calling me?
The person sat in silence for a few seconds, then said my friend's name. They heard their name and they asked me who the hell I was on the phone with.
You're with who I think you are, aren't you? Of course you are. I can see you.
I looked around and didn't see anyone other than my schoolmates. There were only 6 people around us, and nobody was on a call or anything. I got creeped out and hung up. I eventually recognized the voice, and it was my ex's. I told my friend that he kept calling me and texting me from an unknown number since last night, and that I didn't know what to do. She said that I can't really do anything about it, and that I should just ignore the calls. But as time went on, I started to get more letters, sometimes even flowers right next to the fence of my home. For context, my ex was from another city, and I never told him where I lived. He knew what school I went to, but never which class I was in. Then I started to get single roses once a week on my desk when I got to school. My classmates told me that they never saw the person who brought me the roses because they were there by the time they got to class. I was super paranoid. I started to receive pictures of my friends and I outside the school gate, sometimes even when I was alone. I was shitting my pants whenever I saw the unknown number pop up on the screen with a picture attached to the message. I finally had enough one day, and I called his number that was saved in my phone. I called him, but he never picked up. I started texting him on the apps that I didn't get blocked on, and I told him to stop or I'll contact his boss and complain about his creepy behavior, and that I'd even make fake complaints about his service at work so that he'll get fired. He really needed the job, so he left me alone for like a week. But then I started to see him on the street, in public transport, and outside my school. Mind you, this dude lived in another country by the time we broke up, and only came back when he started texting me again. I asked some of his friends about the time he got back, and they told me that he came back to our home country the same day I started getting the calls. I could barely leave the house after I found out that he knew my school schedule, and I always asked one of my classmates who lived nearby to pick me up with their car on our way to school. One day I wasn't so lucky, and my classmate who used to drive me to school was sick and couldn't show up, so I had to take the bus that day. When I got on my bus, I saw his blonde wavy hair, and I froze. I literally wanted to cry and didn't know how to get out of the bus without him getting off at the same stop as me. In my country, we aren't supposed to talk to the driver while he's driving, but I had no other choice than to ask him to not let him out of the bus. I explained the situation, and he was thankfully very understanding, and he didn't let him off the bus. My ex was banging on the glass doors and screaming to be let off at the stop, but the driver just kept the door shut and drove off. I sighed in relief and started crying while I was waiting for another bus to come. It's been a month since school ended, and I haven't seen him after that, but I'm really scared that he might come back when school starts. The police won't do anything about it, and I even started getting threatening letters 2 weeks ago. I carry a pocket knife with me whenever I go out, and I even changed my phone number, but I don't know what else I can do. I also want to mention that he has a twin brother. I knew this, but I never thought that maybe his brother is also involved in this. I'm actually starting to think that they're in on this together, and this is why I see him so often. I went to a wedding of my friend Courtney about 2 days ago, and I still can't shake my mind over what happened. For context, I grew up in a very religious household and went to church every Sunday, and Courtney is probably the only person from my old church that I still keep in contact with. The situation started at the reception. Courtney was super excited to see me, and was definitely the only person who felt that way, judging from all of the staring from the people at my old church. I sat down at my table and started playing something on my phone when some guy sat next to me. He said that the seating chart said that he was supposed to sit at my table, and then introduced himself as the groom's friend, Anthony. He was pretty cute, so I spent a lot of time talking to him, and we really hit it off. He didn't seem to judge me for being an atheist, and he seemed genuinely interested in me. When the dance started, they started playing Brown Eyed Girl, and he offered to dance with me. We danced together for most of the night until he left to go to the bathroom, and a little later I did too. When I came out, I saw that my purse wasn't on the table, which was weird because I swore I left it there. I was tired and I thought I had just left it in my car, so I went into the parking lot and into my car to look for it, and I found it on the center console. I still thought it was weird because I really thought that I had brought it inside, but at that point it was pretty late in the night, so I didn't think too much of it. I danced some more, and I noticed that Anthony was gone. I asked the groom, who said he had gone home because he wasn't feeling too good. Pretty soon, I felt pretty sick too, so I said bye to Courtney and went to my car. As I put my keys in the ignition, I looked behind me and saw something weird. It looked like something had dug down from the trunk. I took out my keys and looked back there, and that's when I saw him. Anthony was crouched down in the trunk of my car. I started screaming and ran out with him chasing after me. I went inside and told Courtney, who immediately told her husband, who walked me back to my car where Anthony was nowhere to be seen. Courtney's husband said that he didn't see his car anywhere, so he probably left. I left, and I still feel sick to my stomach thinking about it. He could have easily got home with me and killed me if I hadn't looked back. Courtney said that she feels terrible that she invited him, and that she had no idea that he would do something like that. I haven't stepped out of my house since, because I'm worried that if I do, he'll be waiting for me like he was before. So I want to give a little update. The last couple of days have been kind of crazy, so I haven't had the chance to look, but thank you all for your advice that I really wish I would have known about earlier. Unfortunately, my address was on my ID. As I now learned, Anthony took photos of it. Anthony and the groom aren't exactly friends, but they know each other well enough for him to be invited to the wedding. After that whole fiasco, the groom tried to text Anthony about it, but got no response. Anthony showed up at my job and lurked around the parking lot before he ran off when he saw security. He left me a note on my windshield that just said, "I'm watching." Security at my job has been notified about him, so hopefully I'm safe there. I was told by other people that went to the wedding that he was introducing himself as my boyfriend and that he was planning on proposing. I'm currently trying to file a restraining order against him, and I feel horrified. He lives in my city and he knows where I live, so I'm staying at my aunt's house as I speak. If anything else happens, I'll be sure to provide an update. A guy I used to work with really wanted to take me hunting. I work at a big retail store as a self-checkout host. Most of my days are spent walking laps and listening to customers saying things like, "I don't work here," or "Why aren't you on the register?" I understood their frustrations. Usually there would be 2 or 3 of us at the self-checkout and maybe 2 manned registers open. Well, we got a new guy in. We'll call him Terry. Terry always wore a mask as it was 2021 and COVID was still COVIDing. I was training him, telling him to stock candy in bags. He would ask questions anyone would ask. If I'm in school, if I have a girlfriend. I lived in a small city/big town that had a good college. Students from all over the country would come and usually wound up within the prisons or retail. He usually asked me the same questions. I told him no on both accounts. He then asked me if I ever went hunting. We had a lot of woods and a big forest around the town. I replied, "No, I don't like guns." He then said that he'd have to take me one day. A few days go by and he's over on my side again. He asks if I have my family in town, and if they aren't, do they live close? I live 3 doors down from my mom. He starts talking about hunting again, how he was out with his buddies and started using pack tactics where they would box in the prey and then finish it off. Weird for deer, seeing as they flee at the first thought of a noise. He's off for a few days because new hires have problems getting hours for the first 3 weeks. I talked to one of my coworkers and they tell me that he asks a lot about me. The next time I see him, his questions are very telling. How tall would you say you are? How much do you weigh? How well do you know the woods past so-and-so street? I'm a big guy at 6 foot and 300 pounds, and when he brought up hunting again, a creepy thought would send chills down my spine. Come on, man, you'd like it. Just some good old boys shooting the shit late at night in the middle of the woods. Then the real fun starts right before dawn. They won't know what hit them. The mask hid most of his face, but I could see a rise when he smiled. I don't know why I thought that would be a great way to convince someone. Other than feeling like they were about to hump me, it sounded like I would have been bored as hell before. I must have made a face or something, because then he turned and walked away quickly. I told a couple of coworkers about it, but that was his last day. I never saw him again, and I hope I never do. There's the street dog near my college campus that I see every day. It is one of the older dogs, so it's always sleeping and very calm in general. I live very near to the college, and my friend and I usually go for a walk late at night after dinner. Tonight was no different, and we were walking around the same route. It's a residential area, so we've never felt unsafe since there are always college students or other families out on the road walking around. We were on our 3rd lap, and this dog was sitting at its usual spot. While we were walking past it, I was gushing about how cute it is and was clearly distracted. Suddenly, my friend said there was a weird car behind us. I turned around to see there was in fact a car driving at a really slow speed. The car pivoted towards us, which made me think that maybe it wanted to park where we were walking and it just might be a random family. As I was about to convey these assumptions to my friend, we heard a dog barking and turned around to see it chasing after the car. Both my friend and I are scared of dogs, so she stood behind me hoping I would save her. But right when I turned around, it was the same street dog from before. I knew right away it wouldn't harm us. The car suddenly sped past us, and the dog didn't chase us or anything. Instead, just stood on guard. When we recovered from the shock of it all, we both had the same realization that the dog might have just saved us. We still don't know if that car had any evil intentions, but the way it sped right when the dog started barking, the timing of it all was just way too bizarre. Plus, it was driving so slow that both of us didn't even realize until it was way too close to us. Needless to say, That dog will be getting extra pets from me every time I see it. This just happened to me like 30 minutes ago, so I'm rather shaken up. A friend and I were walking down the street back to my apartment. It was dark out since it's late here. As we were walking on the sidewalk past a dark parking lot, a woman approached us out of the shadows. She was waiting there for us to approach her, so I thought it was strange. There was also another woman walking alone about half a block ahead of us that passed by her. She didn't stop this woman. She stops us by looking me in the eye and then saying, "Excuse me, I think you're so beautiful and I want to know your name." I thought this was weird, so my friend and I just looked at each other and both just said, Then she said, "I promise I'm not being weird." Still, we didn't answer and kinda just stood there in shock. The woman got more urgent with her pleas, then said, "Please, I just really want to know your name." And finally, I kinda just snapped out of it and then said, "No thank you," and then we walked away. I turned back to see where she went because I got such a bad gut feeling about this, and I saw her talking to a man in a car across the street. They were both looking at us. Then she got in and they sped off. Here's what I think happened. The man with the woman in tow were on a prowl to find a woman to sex traffic. They saw us walking from way down the street and then drove up the street to try and get into position before we walked over there. We didn't notice because it was dark and there was a lot of trees and the street was long. He told her to try and get me in the car, and she tried but failed. I want to know what you guys think though. Do you guys think this was a sex trafficking scheme to try and get us in the car? Why would she be so urgent and aggressive about my name? What was that man doing there? Should I be worried they'll come back? I live about a block from there, so I'm still very scared. I go to the gym rather late. I'm a parent and a college student, so late night gym sessions work out well for me. I once got out of the gym around 12 a.m., stopped at a gas station to put some air into my tires, and I noticed a man kinda eyeing me from afar. Then he came up to me offering to finish for me. I declined. He then went on saying that I have a good figure and that I was really pretty. I thanked him, then tried to go about my business. He keeps talking, and he mentions how I remind him of his girlfriend who died a couple of years ago, and how he's in Arizona trying to get his shit together. There was a red car parked next to me, and it was full of stuff in the back like someone lived in it. He said it was his and he was renting a little room for his business, but the landlord found out he was living in it and not doing business, so he got kicked out. He said it was full of books and that he loved reading and I don't know what else. He said that he doesn't have anywhere to go, and he can't go anywhere because he doesn't have plates on his car. He asked if I would follow him back to the office so the police would avoid reading his plates, since around this time there's a bunch of them. I already knew this was a major red flag, but I was raised as a people pleaser, and I couldn't say no. After I said yes, I just knew I had made a mistake, and I tried to turn back. He said it's fine, that it's just down the street and that it'll be quick. I follow him and we get to the office. It's in a dark alley, no one was around, and there were no street lights. He tried to talk when he got out of his car, and I kept my windows rolled up with a small crack, just enough for him and I to hear each other, but not so much that he could reach inside, and I kept my doors locked. He then asked if I wanted to come inside and see his books that he bragged about so much, and how they helped him cope with his girlfriend's death. He then opened the door to his office and he tried to convince me that there wasn't anyone there, that it's safe. But all I saw was one exit to a small ass room and he was standing right in front of it. I did see the books, but it wasn't enough to convince me. He said that he would bring them outside, but they're too heavy. I declined and said no, that I won't be going in there with him. But he kept trying to talk me into it, saying he's not going to do anything to me. He just wants to show me his books in his office. I declined again and said I would be leaving. He then stopped, was quiet for a bit, then said,
You know what? You're smart.
After that, I sped off, and I never saw him again. I'm now at a phase in my life where I say no to anyone, and I'm always armed. I realized that I did put myself in that situation, and I also thank myself for being smart enough to get the hell out of it. I just wanted to share and spread awareness. I was at Walmart today with my wife and our newborn. As we were nearing the exit, I had noticed a younger woman in her 30s waiting and making eye contact with me, waiting around with an older man who looked to be in his 50s. She was giving off heavy meth vibes, and he was just disheveled. For whatever reason, they didn't pass the vibe, so I had my eyes on a swivel, and as we walked back to our car, they followed us down to our car, but a few paces behind. Still too far to approach. I put the baby and groceries in the car and closed everything, and the man ended up fumbling with his keys, as if to try and find his car. I was sufficiently on my nerves at this point, so I looped around with the car to see where they'd parked, and it turned out they were 4 lanes over. They then got into a car that was already running but parked with out-of-state plates, Vermont, and we're in North Carolina, which makes the key fumbling by the gentleman really out of character. Am I just being paranoid, or is this some sort of thing that happens? Or maybe it's just new parent creeps. I'd really like to know everyone's thoughts. Also, I did have our groceries in the bottom of the stroller. Maybe they wanted to steal those? This was also 2 p.m. at a busy Walmart in the Triangle area. I don't know. All I know is they really gave me the creeps. One day I stopped at the Burger King around 6 in the morning on my way to work. I parked in front and got out of the car. I pretty much always keep a level of situational awareness wherever I go, and didn't see anyone else walking around the parking lot. Maybe 10 to 15 seconds after I walked into the Burger King, a man in sunglasses came in after me. It was as if he had come out of nowhere, but I didn't pay that much mind at the time. I ordered some coffee and hash browns and waited by the counter. The man then approached me.
Hey, is that your car over there?
He gestured out the window of my car. Yeah.
Where are you headed?
To the university. My first instinct was to lie. I was actually headed to my job off campus, but I was already feeling weirded out by the encounter, and I didn't want to tell him where I worked.
Well, do you think you could give me a ride to Watershed Drive?
The street that he mentioned just so happened to be on the way to the university. How convenient. I gave him a good look. He still had his sunglasses on. Maybe he just forgot to take them off? It was rather odd he was wearing sunglasses in the first place, as it was a cloudy morning and the sun was just barely even out. Generic looking white guy, probably in his 40s or 50s. He was well groomed and neatly dressed, wearing a button-up shirt and a tan leather jacket, nice dress shoes. Didn't look like someone down on his luck at all, or at least not in so bad a situation he couldn't afford an Uber. Not that he really needed one. It was about a 20 to 30 minute walk. And call me cruel, but being a young female, I wasn't going to take my chances with letting an absolute stranger in my car. So of course I just said, "Nope, sorry." He nodded, shuffled around for a few more seconds, then left the Burger King without ordering anything. I found the whole encounter rather odd, but went about my day as usual. When I was about to leave work, I started thinking about it again. As I was heading to the university after work, and he knew I was a student there, and he knew exactly what car I had, and I was getting paranoid. It was a very distinct car, an electric blue PT Cruiser, so it stood out like a sore thumb. I convinced myself I was being unreasonable, getting so freaked out over a stranger asking for a ride, but my coworker agreed it was bizarre, and they suggested that I report it to the police just in case. At face value, it was a mundane interaction, but there were so many little factors that put me on alert. So I ended up calling the non-emergency line, prefacing it with, "It happened hours ago and it's probably nothing but," just to have it on the record. I was convinced they were going to tell me I was overreacting, but after I gave the description of the man in sunglasses, the dispatcher's tone immediately became urgent. She then scolded me for not reporting this earlier. She said she was going to send some troopers to the Burger King right away, but that it's probably too late by now. She told me to call immediately if I saw him again. To be honest, the dispatcher's reaction shook me more than the encounter itself, and it's why I still remember it so vividly years later. I wonder if my description perfectly matched someone they were looking for. I do regret not calling earlier, but I was convinced they'd tell me I was overreacting. I never did see him again, but to this day I still wonder. So I recently got a job at Walmart in online grocery, and while I don't talk to customers nearly as much as cashiers or customer service, I do have to answer a lot of questions and direct people to items that they can't find. There are plenty of stupid people who don't look before asking me where something is, and the people who are just plain rude. But besides this one encounter, I haven't really had a problem with creepy men. At my past jobs, I was used to men making horrible comments about my body and body mods, but I guess at Walmart there's always someone weirder walking around, so I don't get as many. It started at around noon when I went out on my first pick run of the day. I was in the soda aisle struggling to fit a box pack of beer into my cart when this guy came up and helped me. He was probably in his early to mid-20s. This kind of adds up to the creep factor because I only recently turned 18 and I haven't switched out my yellow name tag yet. He was a bigger guy, a bit shorter than me, and he was wearing a corn shirt. I thanked him for helping me and said I liked his shirt. He said it was no problem and then complimented my hair. No big deal, right? I pick up my handheld and get back to bagging soda and praying that I don't get sent on exceptions that night. Around 15 minutes later, I'm in the soup aisle crouched on the floor bagging 20 cans of Dinty Moore. Not my finest moment. Someone walks up behind me and then says, "Hey, excuse me," and I'm already excited to talk to them. Nobody, and I mean nobody, says excuse me whenever they want my attention. I stand up and turn around to see the same guy. He says he's been looking everywhere and he can't find the baking soda, and that he knows that he probably passed it, but he wants to make sure he's looking in the right area. The baking aisle is just a few over, and what a coincidence. The next thing I need for my run is bread flour. I tell him I'm heading over to the aisle the baking soda's in right now, and I'll show him where it is. He says thank you. I finish scanning the Dinty Moore, and we head over. It was a Tuesday and completely dead. Like I was seeing my coworkers more often than customers. We get to the baking aisle and I show him the baking soda before getting to picking out the bread flour. I had a lot to pick from in that aisle, so I was there for a good 10 minutes picking different items, and I couldn't help but notice that he put a tiny box of Arm & Hammer into his cart, and he was just standing there on his phone, occasionally looking at me. A little strange, but maybe he's texting someone and feeling a bit awkward that neither of us has left the aisle. Who knows? I finish my pick run, stage the totes into the cart, and bring it to the back. I go on 2 more runs before my first 15-minute break, and I catch a glimpse of Corn Guy every so often. I figure he's just having a hard time finding stuff because the Walmart I work at is massive, and continue on with my day. I go into the break room to eat the salad that I had in the fridge and drink a cherry Pepsi while getting the good gossip from one of the guys from customer service, and life is good. For a second, I thought I saw Corn Guy walk past the door, but I figured it was just an employee wearing the same shirt and didn't think of it again until later. My manager tells me to do 3 more pick runs before I go to the back to start dispensing orders, and I then head out on a produce run. Easily one of the worst types, as the produce section is super confusing and always crazy busy. I get to the produce section and start doing my thing, when I then see Corn Guy standing next to the corn stand. I laugh to myself for a second before realizing that it's 1:30 a.m. at this point, and this guy has been at Walmart for at least an hour and a half. There are only 3 things in his cart. I try not to look in his direction so he doesn't try to talk to me, and get back to bagging onions and weighing apples. At this point, I'm getting some serious weirdo vibes from this guy. He walks up to me and says hi. I say hi back and I ask him if he needs anything. He proceeds to go on the creepiest tirade I've ever heard. I remember almost exactly what he said because I was standing there in absolute horror the entire time while holding a bag of apples. He said, "I just wanted you to know that you don't need to eat salad if you don't want to. You don't need to lose weight. If you're trying to impress that guy you were talking to, you should just go for someone who'll love you for who you are, not someone who would want to change you like that. You're so beautiful." I stare at this man in shock. For one, I eat salads for lunch because I freaking like them. It sure ain't a healthy salad either. Those things are loaded with Caesar dressing and bacon bits. Second of all, I have a boyfriend already. It's not Gavin from customer service, and he's also fat and couldn't care less of what I eat. Third of all, I take offense that some random creep thinks that I, a grown-ass woman, have been waiting all my life to be validated by him, a man who spends all day at Walmart without even being paid for it. Needless to say, I'm horrified and embarrassed because he just said this in front of multiple other customers who are giving us weird looks and pissed off by the audacity of this damn weirdo. I can't tell him any of this though. I stick with telling him that I think that's inappropriate for him to say, and he needs to stay out of employee-only areas like the break room, and if he needs anything else, he can go ahead and talk to customer service. He looks shocked as if this wasn't the nicest way I could have ended the conversation, and I end my pick run early to go talk to a manager. In the back, I tell my manager all about Corn Guy, how he's been following me, and how I'm not going back out to pick tonight unless we know for sure that he's gone. She's understanding and she lets me start dispensing early, and she sends one of the guys in the back to pick in my place. The rest of the day goes okay, except when my coworker and I go out together to take a huge order in one of the spots in the main parking lot, and Corn Guy is sitting on the bench out front. I prayed that he was just waiting for someone to pick him up and refused to take out any more orders to the main lot. I managed to put away returns without seeing him and with minimal trouble, and at 8 I go back to OGP, turn in my handheld and keycard, and say goodbye to everyone left. Now, I always park in the main lot right in front of the grocery section, and as I'm walking, it's just starting to get a bit dark. It had been raining on and off the whole day, and it was the perfect balance of summer warmth and cold rain outside. As I'm unlocking my shitty old CRV, I see Corn Guy approaching me. I'm really scared on what the hell he wants from me, but at this point I have my keys out and the pepper spray on the chain is clearly visible, so I'm hoping he isn't stupid enough to try something. He walks up to me and starts trying to talk. I shut him down, tell him that he's been following me all day, and that I'm really uncomfortable talking to him. Reminder that he's been at Walmart for a full 8 hours at this point. I also tell him that I'm off the clock, and if he needs something regarding Walmart, he can go talk to customer service, and if he wants to talk to me personally, I'm not interested and he needs to leave me the hell alone. He has the nerve to actually look offended, and then he says something that tops a salad rant in terms of stupid shit to say to a random woman. "Okay, well, since you're gonna be like that, I won't ask you out, ungrateful bitch. I thought you were cool and that maybe you could understand me, but you're just like every other girl." I'm too morbidly curious, so I ask him what the hell that means. "I mean, you seem cool. I don't see anyone around here with ears stretched that big or who can appreciate Corn's artistry. I thought that maybe you were on my level, but you're just like every other stupid Midwesterner in this shitty town." At the end of this little rant, he digs in the pocket of his sweatpants and produces the shittiest little switchblade I've ever seen in my life. This pitiful little thing couldn't even skin a hamster. I'm somehow even more offended. First, I've been stalked all day because I have stretched ears and complimented a guy's band shirt. Second, he thinks Korn is some deep cut metal band that nobody else has ever heard of. Third of all, we do live in Iowa, but we live in one of the largest cities in Iowa, and this Walmart is right in the middle of it. And fourth, he's not only threatening me with a knife for not living up to his manic pixie dream girl fantasy, but he thinks I'm going to be scared of that pathetic excuse of a knife. At this point, I'm so sick of this asshole that I get in my car, tell him to screw off, and then slam the door and get the hell out of there. I haven't seen him since, but I work pretty much every day, so I guess it's only a matter of time.
This
This happened when I was 7 years old. I grew up in a religious family and would often go to church every Sunday with my grandmother. My grandmother is a devoted Catholic and always participates in every event at our local church. This particular church was huge. It had a beautiful facade with intricate designs, large wooden doors, and stained glass windows depicting scenes from the Bible. Inside, the high ceilings and grand arches created a sense of amazement. There was a long central aisle leading up to the altar, which was decorated with statues of saints, candles, and flowers. As a little girl, I never took church as seriously as it was. I easily got bored whenever we went there, but I had no choice but to go with my grandmother, as she was the one who took care of me since I was little. It was one cold Sunday afternoon, and we were set to go to church. I wore a lovely ruffled white dress with my little black shoes. We left the house and hopped into our car. I sat in the back while my grandmother was driving. As we passed by the tall, dark trees, I suddenly felt something heavy that I couldn't explain at that moment. I couldn't even look at the window, so I called out to my grandmother, but she responded that maybe I was hungry or just being naughty and just didn't want to go to church with her. We arrived at the church and parked. As we stepped out of the car and walked toward the entrance of the church, I gazed at a trash can near a statue and was terrified to see a black cat inside a plastic bag. Its tongue was pulled out of his mouth, and there was a slash in his belly with blood dripping from it. I didn't know how to react to what I had seen, so I closed my eyes and hid behind my grandma's skirt. From that moment, I knew that something was off in this church. I was scared to tell my grandma what I had seen until it was also the last time that I went to that church. After that, I decided that I wanted to go live with my dad, but I never told them the real reason why. Years have passed, and now I'm 19 years old. Recently, I was scrolling through Facebook when I came across a post talking about the same church. There, I saw numerous pictures of related cult activities in that church, including satanic rituals and sacrifices. It was devastating to see how one of the priests, who was a great friend of my grandmother, was involved in that case. I never asked anything about this to my grandmother, and she's still part of the church to this day. Meet Jane. I don't know much about Jane except that she's from a small town and she moved here with her friends and boyfriend for university. When I first met Jane at the pub, I thought that she hated my guts. She always gave me nasty looks, and when my friends tried to approach her friends, she'd be rude to me. Jane is pretty, like very, very pretty. Like every guy in town has a thing for her. But Jane's boyfriend is insane to say the least. They're regulars at the pub and I've seen them break up around 3 to 4 times. And the waiter working at the pub says he's noticed them break up a dozen more, but they always come back together. A couple of months back, I had just finished with the gym and I just showered when my mom called and asked about this pub and how's the food there. I told her the food's to die for, and she said she and my stepdad were on their way there. I told them I would meet them too because I was actually dying for some hot wings and a burger. We sat down and me and my dad just started drinking beer after beer. And in no time, I had downed a lot of beer. I was getting a little tipsy, but I just kept pushing through. My dear friend, who we'll call Tina, called and asked if I was down for a drink. I told her to come to the pub as I was already there. She's gonna meet my folks and they had planned on leaving soon, so she and I could continue. That's how it happened. My parents left and Tina and I continued drinking on our own. The pub was closing, so Tina decided to go to the bathroom and I walked with her inside to see if I could get another pint. We stumble upon Jane. Jane starts talking to Tina and I realize they know each other. We all sat down to comfort her as she was a crying mess. Her and her boyfriend were done for good, and she then revealed that he used to really abuse her. Mentally and physically. I felt bad for her, so when she rested on my shoulder, I just let her. Well, the next night, I get a DM from her, and she's apologizing about the trauma dumping. I tell her it's no biggie as we all need to vent sometimes. We continue chatting, and she constantly goes between I can't text you and then texting me again. Then she doesn't text me and then texts me first when I don't. Keep in mind, this is like 2 days since that interaction. One drunken night, she had texted me to meet her. It was around 2 a.m. and I had my little cousin over. That whole night, we just watched movies and he had just fallen asleep, so I had declined her offer. Also, I feel it'd be a bit weird for me to hang out with her completely sober while she can barely see. I don't know, just weird to me. The next day, she sobered up and I agreed to meet her for a hangout. While we hung out for a while and she was fun to hang out with, I did like her and I did worry about her and her ex. Soon enough, her leech of an ex left town and he was never really interested in uni, just being close to her. On one of our dates, she then revealed to me that she realized she had feelings for me, and that's when she broke up with her ex, resulting in him physically attacking her. Well, one day we had a date at her place, a little study date. After we finished studying, we had relaxed on the couch and we ended up making out. We didn't have sex that night, but we did other things. I went home and we continued talking about it, even exchanging photos. Then we hooked up. Now, I'm a person who likes alone time, so sometimes I just want to chill in my house and not really be with anyone. And well, she did not like this idea. She started spamming me with calls, saying how she could come over and we can chill. She'll be silent and I'd still be alone. In my opinion, that kinda defeats the idea of being alone, as in I'm not fucking alone. She then threatened me that if I didn't pick up the phone, she would never talk to me again. This is where I snapped, and I told her that her lukewarm at best manipulation tactics would not work on me and to not contact me again. She totally flipped out and came to my part of town, hanging out and waiting for me to come out. I told her I begged her millions of times not to come to my house, but she just simply said, "Nah, I'll pass," and came anyway. I literally felt so disrespected because all of a sudden I hold no value in life. When she then texted me, "Come out, I'm here," I texted her back, "Nah, I'll pass," and stayed home. Now she's following me everywhere I go. It's been months and I'm now dating the girl of my dreams, but that hasn't stopped her from being in my shadow. She learned my routine. When I go to the gym, when I'm at practice, etc., and she never fails to show up or drive past where I'm at. My stepbrother reviewed the security footage from our house, and we counted her car driving past my house at least 14 times in a day. I still get texts from her on the daily even though she's blocked. She gets wasted and spams me with messages on WhatsApp that she then deletes. My girlfriend is absolutely livid with this chick, as she wouldn't leave me the fuck alone. I don't fear for my life, but I have warned my friends that if I die, it wouldn't be an accident or a suicide. She's in my shadow. I have to constantly check if she's behind me. Update. So a lot of shit happened 2 days ago, and I couldn't update right away as I really needed to shut off as I had a huge exam today. Well, now I can finally let myself process it without causing any distractions. Well, we met again at my damn house. So 2 days ago, I went to the pub with my friend Stan. He's a new friend of mine as he's a close friend of one of my best friends. My neighbor Jake was in Durban to visit his aunt, and me and Stan went to the pub as his friend and my other best friend Liam was having a closing shift at the pub. So we went and visited him and had a few drinks. She was there, and everyone was giving me these weird stares like I'd murdered their whole family. Finally, the shift manager whom I'm close with came up to me, and she laughingly told me that Jane got extremely drunk and talked about a man the whole night at the pub while sobbing. She then showed them a picture of me, and according to some other waiters, she was throwing an entire ass tantrum because she loved me, and because she left her boyfriend because of me. Regardless, I brushed it off, and I had to fight off the player accusation because I'm not one. Anyway, Liam finished his shift, we got into my car, and we drove to my house where my girlfriend had already arrived. My mom and her were in the kitchen making dinner, and my stepbrother, younger brother, and stepdad were in the living room just shooting the shit, so I joined them with my friends. At one point while I was in the kitchen with my mom, girlfriend, and stepbrother, my mom had asked, "Who made the kitchen into a mess this morning?" To which my stepbrother blamed it on me and my younger brother. We had a little laugh about it, so I didn't hear the doorbell. But my stepdad did, and he went to open the door. Jane was at the door. She had let herself in, and she was standing in the living room yelling after me. We came out of the kitchen, and we were just staring at her. She begged to talk to me, and I just stared at her and told her that we had already covered everything, but she continued begging me. My girlfriend pulled me aside and told me to just talk to her. Maybe it'll give her closure and she'll leave me alone. I took her to my backyard and she had started apologizing for hurting me. She said I'm sorry like 15 times. I told her that she has nothing to apologize for and that I sadly cannot forgive manipulations that easily and that she should really give up at this point. She had started blaming the alcohol on it and how she got drunk that night. I told her that she's been drunk every day for 9 months now since she arrived in this town and that she's only known me for 6 of those 9 months. She tells me how she used to drink herself crazy back then because of me too. Here's where I snapped. I told her that I just caught her in another one of her lies, and she then smirked and gave me this creepy look. I love lying to you. The look she gave me sent shivers down my spine. My yard was dark, and her eyes just seemed demonic for a brief moment. She was continuously getting closer to me, and I froze. I couldn't step back. Not that she'd hurt me, as I'm 6'2" and 250 pounds, but a knife would really do some good damage. But Jane had another idea. She launched herself at me, locking her lips with mine. I pushed her off, yelling for her to stop, yelling, "No! No!" I then walked inside. I was mad. My girlfriend looked like she was about to beat her up. I then looked at my stepdad and begged him to drive her home. They got her out of my house with her kicking and screaming, but she refused my stepdad's car ride and decided to just walk in the middle of the night. And whoever lives in South Africa knows how fucking stupid that idea is. Anyway, she got home safe, and I woke up to her text from WhatsApp that she had deleted from a phone number she had blocked me from. So I really pray that she's actually done with me this time, because this is just too much to handle. I was 13 or 14 years old when this took place. I'm almost 20 now, so forgive the lack of some smaller details. I used to walk to high school when I was a freshman. It's a little over exactly a mile away from my house. My city is pretty rough when it comes to crime and transient activity, but it isn't busy by any means. The street that I took to walk to school was always busy during drop-off and pickup time though. The street is very close to a bad and well-trafficked area by homeless people, as well as actively tweaking meth addicts, people carrying bags of stolen aluminum cans, pushing shopping carts for a Target that's a mile away full of their belongings, that kind of stuff. Most of the transient folks in my city are nice people. There's plenty of homeless people who are super sweet and nice to have a conversation with. I didn't ever worry about much walking to school because of this. I generally have always had a good gauge of who to trust and who to stay away from in my city, as someone who's lived here my whole life. People do go missing, but generally the areas I walk or drive at might tend to be mostly safe from some creepy dude hitting on me, etc. My parents were severe alcoholics for most of my childhood, and our neighbor had recently dropped me off at an after-school event in her light blue minivan because they were too drunk to drive. She's an older woman with health issues that my dad used to help around the house. I wouldn't have thought twice about what happened next if it weren't for the fact that I'd just seen my neighbor Sharon recently for that drop-off in her car. I tend to be face blind, and I'm overly polite in situations whenever I see red flags, but I would have immediately been sketched out otherwise. Please try to be understanding before telling me that I should have done X, Y, or Z, because I know, and I tend to be a lot more careful now. I'm about 2 blocks from the high school when I see a light blue minivan pull over to the right. It's pretty old looking and beat up, and the woman driving seemed to be the only one in it. She had rolled her windows down and asked if I wanted a ride to the rest of the way to school. I said no, I'm okay. I was being polite as I kind of thought she was Sharon. I wasn't sure, but she had the same aged look on her face and reddish brown wispy old lady hair. My son goes to the same school as you. It's no trouble. Get in." Now, this is when I was absolutely sure that this was not Sharon. She didn't have a son in high school, and by now she would have said my name. I'm a female, but at the time I had very short brown hair. I looked pretty androgynous as I was wearing black jeans and a big school t-shirt. I don't know if she even knew I was a girl. I said no again, this time more firmly. Well, she dropped the nice act and she straight up yelled at me to get in her car, that she was going to be taking me. I yelled no and put in my earbuds, walking faster and avoiding eye contact. A car pulled up behind her, and even though she was pulled slightly over, the road is very narrow and one lane on each side. The car behind her honked her horn and she sped off at 40 miles per hour in a school zone. I genuinely forgot all about this and didn't think anything of it. Maybe she was just some weird lady that thought she was doing me a favor and she saw me saying no as disrespectful. Sometimes old people are just like that. Well, my friend actually called me later that day, saying that someone was kidnapped from my school that same day walking to it. My friend had seen something minimal and she was on the phone with the police before she called me. That's when it hit me. That fucking lady didn't have a kid in her car at all. Her story made absolutely no sense. She wanted me in her car, and probably because she was the same woman who kidnapped that poor kid on their way to my school that same day. When I said this to my friend, she had called the police back and told them my story. I never heard anything about that incident again. I occasionally remember this story, and even though it had a happy ending for me, I really hope that kid eventually got found safely, or that it was just some kind of freak coincidence. Just a warning, the story does include sexual assault. Everything I'm about to mention really did happen, and I'm just happy that I made it out okay. It was around September 2021. I had turned 18 a few months prior. There were multiple instances beforehand that led me to a pretty lonely existence. I was living in a flat with the owner. The owner wasn't home often, so I spent multiple nights alone. It was very strict and I wasn't allowed people over either. That and the fact that I've always had trouble making friends. One day, another day spending too much time in my head with my own thoughts, I started thinking, I'm 18 and I'm wasting my youth being lonely. I then came to a thought that maybe I should experiment with my sexuality since I haven't had a lot of experience. I had this mindset that I now look back and cringe a little. I thought I was going to find confidence, find deeper parts of myself. Well, I downloaded an app called Pure. My first impression after opening the app was, wow, this looks really fun. The app lets you put up an ad in your area, and you can view others that have posted ads nearby. The majority of ads I saw people who would post what their kinks are and what they're seeking. The thing is, I didn't even know what my kinks were. I kinda felt confronted. I ended up thinking about what the people on that app would want to hear. So all I put was something like, looking for fun, super kinky. Later that day I checked the app and I noticed I was absolutely spammed with messages. Once I had hopped into bed that night, I found the time to go through them and message some back. I felt pretty uncomfortable messaging some of these people. Some were very pushy, asking the typical things like for nude pics and a lot of sexual questions, but I also put it down to my lack of experience and openness. Then going through the requests, I saw him, red hair, blue eyes, smiling and holding a snake in both of his hands. He was 36, but he did look attractive for his age. For some reason, I felt drawn to the guys that had photos up on the app. It felt like they were confident and had nothing to hide, so I sent him a message. Hey, I think you're cute. He messaged me back almost immediately. Now, I don't remember the exact words that he used, but he ended up asking me a bit more about what I was into. I just said, a lot, but usually it depends a lot on who I'm with, when in reality I had no damn idea. Overall, we ended up agreeing to message on Snapchat, and I ended up kinda deleting the app and regretted downloading it. On Snapchat, he had sent me a snap of him with that stupid dog filter, captioned, "So can I see what you look like? I bet you're cute." I was nervous, but I had sent him back a selfie. I'll admit, what he sent in response should have been my first warning sign. He then said, "What a gorgeous little face. I'd love to fuck it and choke it until you can't breathe." I was slightly uncomfortable after seeing it, but I thought I was just being overdramatic. I also thought that maybe I'm into this. I just wasn't sure because it was all new to me. Overall, I was interested in this guy because in his messages he did come across as a down-to-earth nice guy. These are just his kinks, right? So I still kept talking to him daily. He said that he was interested in the connection and not just sex. As we kept talking, there were a few instances where his kinks raised some more warning signs for me that I again just brushed away. For example, he would say stuff like, "I want to choke you so hard. I'm gonna punish you with my belt." For me, I thought this was all just him playing a little dominant BDSM with me. I wish I knew just how extreme this was in reality. So it's a Friday night. I'm in my room texting him like I have been for the past 3 months. We still didn't meet because he said that he was always busy. However, we started texting and I was just being playful when he then said, "How dare you tease me like that? You're gonna get a punishment for that." Now at first, I didn't take him all that seriously. And right after, he had sent me another message. "I've sent an Uber to your location. Get in and I'll be waiting for you, you naughty slut." I pulled away from my phone for a brief second in disbelief. I realize now that I was stupid enough during that time to also have my Snapchat location on. I messaged him back, "I can't, sorry. Please, can you just cancel the Uber?" He then replied, "It's too late. He's already on his way." He then reassured me that it would be nice and he would take care of me. Of course, I was very uncomfortable, but I tried to take this as an opportunity. After all, time's ticking away and I'm still inexperienced, so I quickly accepted my destiny. I ran to quickly get dressed and nervously waited for the Uber to show up. A few minutes later, the Uber showed up and I nervously hopped in. It was a nice Indian man. We said hi, but kept him mainly quiet for the rest of the ride. The drive there felt like forever. It was only around 30 minutes, but during this time I knew I was making some kind of mistake. Something about this whole situation was just off. I didn't want to believe that, but my instincts were telling me that. Then the Uber drives into a dark street looking like it's on a more sketchy part of town. He pulls over, and I can see right in front of me through the car window a house. The house was wooden and fairly old. It had a balcony out the front and a window directly on it. Through the window, the lights were on, and I could see the figure of a man standing directly at it. The Uber driver then said, "This is your destination. Have a good night." And the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I knew in that moment I had made a big mistake, but I felt like there was no way out. I hopped out of the Uber, and I couldn't see the shadow through the window anymore. I sent him a message, "Hey, I'm here," to which he messaged me back, "Come inside." My stomach felt sick. I knew that I was making a big mistake, but I felt frozen. I felt stuck and like this was my destiny now. I walked up the steps and opened the door. There's a gap in my memory here possibly, but all I remember is he violently pushed me up against the wall with his hand tightly choking my neck. He had a belt in his hand. He was saying stuff like, "I've been waiting for this moment for so long," and also talking about how I'm finally going to get my punishment. Looking to my left, I could see a dim hallway that went down and then across. He held his grip for a good minute while staring deeply at me. I remember feeling the blood rushing, quivering, and desperately moving my feet while being unable to breathe. He then grabbed me by my hair and dragged me across the hallway. I tried to refuse, pushing my feet and arms into the ground, but this would only make him more violent. He had so much strength that every attempt to stop him was putting up a big fight. Once he had gotten me to the bottom of his hallway, he put me on his bed. He then looked at me with pure anger. He was shouting at me constantly with wide eyes, but I can barely remember what he was saying. I think my brain was basically just shut down during that point. This guy had every intention of hurting me, and I knew I was screwed. He forcefully pushed me onto my stomach, pulled down my pants, and you know the rest. The pain was unbearable. He did it again and again, continuously with no backing down, and I was just screaming, begging him to stop. This guy was enjoying every second of this, yet his face was still firm and angry. After I then said, "Please no, stop!" he of course didn't listen. He pulled on my hair, which he eventually pulled some out of my scalp. I tried to move up, and I remember that he pushed me back down, then shouting, "You fucking stay down, bitch!" For the end of that, I just gave in and listened. That night, I didn't sleep. I just laid there feeling nothing. I went home early the next morning with my head having dried bloodstains, and it hurt horribly for days along with all of the bruises. I immediately blocked him and I never talked to him again. I realize now, years later, what a dangerous situation I put myself in, and all of the steps that I could have taken to avoid all that. To those listening, monsters do exist, and I wish I could say this story was exaggerated. Please stay safe out there. Read the signs before it's too late. Trust your instincts. I'm gonna do my best to make this short and sweet. Just so you know, this is from the perspective of a female. This happened 20 years ago when I was 11 years old. Before we moved to another city for my father's job, our house was right by almost anywhere that you needed to go. The church, the stores, the library, everything. The library was right across the street down the hill. Whenever me and my sisters would finish our homework, or whenever it was spring break or summer break, we would all go to the library and get out some books. Also, during this time I was homeschooled along with my younger sister. We can only carry a minimum of 7 books because we didn't want to drop any in the middle of the road. One day me and my mom decided to go to the library to get some books. She told me to go into the kids aisle while she goes into the adult section to look for a book that she's been looking for and hope that it was still there. I found my favorite book and I sat down and started reading it. After I was done, I went to the front to go check it out. While I was getting ready to check out my book, an old man came over and he looked very creepy. He had wiry hair, bug eyes, crooked missing teeth, and he looked to be no more than in his late 50s to early 60s, and he stood at least 5'10". He came over with this creepy grin and looked at me, then saying,
"Your mom is waiting for you in the parking lot. She told me to come in here and get you."
Almost immediately, my red flags and sirens began to go off in my head. I slowly backed up and went to the front desk. One of the librarians at the checkout came over and asked me, "Hey, are you ready to check out, young lady?" I was scared out of my wits. I didn't know what to say. My eyes were completely wide out of fear. Even though we were in the library, I could have screamed, but I couldn't because I was too scared. I know we were taught to use our inside voices whenever we go somewhere quiet, but again, I just couldn't say anything. The librarian looked at me and then said, "Hey, are you all right?" I just slowly directed my eyes over to the old man that was standing within at least 20 feet away from me, still grinning. She squinted her eyes a little bit, then followed the direction I was looking at. Then the realization hit her. She came around the desk and gently put me in a chair by the door, then said to me, "Stay here and do not move. I'll be right back." The whole time sitting there, I was looking back at the old man with wide eyes, and not within 2 seconds, as soon as the librarian went to the back, the old man started walking toward me. I felt my heart beating really fast, and my breathing started getting really heavy, as I then clutched the book I was going to check out in my hand now tighter. When he was within 7 feet near me, another librarian who was male and bigger came over and checked on me, then asked if I was all right. The whole time that I was looking at the man, the librarian looked over and the old man stopped and looked at him. He then quickly turned around and walked off and then went out the door. The librarian then told me to stay put as he went after the guy. Within a few minutes later, the man came back and came over to me. He's not going to bother you anymore, so don't worry about him. My mom, however, at this point was in the adult section when this happened. She told me to let her know when I was ready to leave after I checked out a book. After she got her book, we left the library, and the whole ride home I silently broke down, and I didn't tell my mother about this until a few years later. I also told my father a little while later as well. I'm 30 years old now. Okay, so the story will take some setting up first, but I promise it's all relevant in one way or another. It's also pretty long, so I'm sorry for that. I felt like it was necessary to give all the info to show the scope of just how crazy this particular ex really was. Also, I'm not even the main character of the story, though I do play a role in it. It happened to my partner both before and after we started dating. My partner and I are both non-binary. There's also 3 more people who will be important. I'll call them Nick and Stella, my partner's best friends whom I'm also friends with, as well as Bonnie, who used to be childhood friends with my partner until a certain event, but I'll get to that. I'll call my partner Alex. The main villain of this story is Jennifer, my partner's ex and later friend. Another important thing is that my partner has BPD along with other issues, so if you start wondering why he kept talking to Jennifer until recently, keep that in mind. BPD makes you get attached to anyone who shows you basic kindness, and once you're attached, it's incredibly hard to get away, even if they abuse you. So with all that said, here's the story of my partner's crazy ex. It all started in 2019. My partner has had several relationships before, but all of them were online and most of them were also abusive. I don't really remember how he met Jennifer, but they got together immediately. They lived pretty far apart but in the same country, so they decided to meet after 2 weeks of dating. Something also to note here is that my partner was 17 at the time and Jennifer was 18, which isn't that much of an age gap, but she still had more power than him, if only in a legal sense. So they met in a city close to where my partner lives. He was nervous about meeting his first not purely online girlfriend, so he took Bonnie along with him. Apparently immediately after seeing both people, she fell hard for Bonnie. Yeah, first in-person date with her partner and she falls in love with someone else. I mean, stuff like that can happen, but you can be civil about it and then not do what she did next. But I'll get there. And yes, she knew what Alex looked like. They video called many times before meeting, so all of them got on a bus to Alex's place. Bonnie didn't come over, but she lived in the same village. When Alex and Jennifer were alone, they ended up having sex. Alex was a virgin at the time, but she wasn't. She mocked him for being bad at dirty talk. After asking him to just talk dirty to her with no elaboration, Alex told me that he'd always felt bad about it, but teenagers are horny, so he'd let it slide. The next day, Bonnie came over and they all hung out and played party games, which led to Bonnie and Jennifer almost kissing. Alex was there for the whole thing. You might be wondering why Bonnie was so okay with her best friend being almost cheated on. Well, she wasn't the best person back then either from what I know, and she found Jennifer attractive also, and she was single. So the blame is still all on Jennifer in my opinion. You might be wondering how I know all of this, including Jennifer's feelings. She wrote about everything publicly on Wattpad, without naming anyone but with enough details that anyone who knew her at the time would know who every person involved was. But I'll get to that story later. When Bonnie left, Jennifer told Alex that she found her attractive. Alex was understandably distraught, which apparently caused Jennifer to have a tetanic seizure. Except she later admitted to Alex that she was faking it to get away from the conversation. She was proud about it, and she said it made her feel like an anime manipulator. She did have tetany at the time. I don't know if it's gotten better or not, and she would get seizures quite often. But this one was faked until she was driven to a hospital where she got a real one upon realizing that her plan backfired and she would have to lie to the doctors there. And Alex stayed with her through it all. Like I said before, He'd gotten way too attached, and even after she admitted that she wanted his best friend at the time instead, he still wanted to stay with her, which I guess made her feel like crap that she would even consider cheating on someone like him. But that didn't stop her from making the rest of their relationship as terrible as possible. She would yell at Alex all the time for not being independent and not standing up to his abusive father, who was paying for Alex's school, as again, Alex wasn't even adult at the time. She'd get mad that he was immature, that he had ADHD and showed symptoms, that he wanted to cuddle with her, that he wanted to do sex acts that she didn't enjoy. Speaking of that, she'd make him do anal every time they had sex, which was whenever they saw each other in person. Alex told me that he'd always hated that, but whenever he said no, she'd yell at him. She'd also embarrass him in front of their friend group, which included Bonnie, Nick, and Stella. Jennifer would fight Alex whenever they hung out. She would also tell him he was only good for sex. She told him that she hated everything about him, but that the sex was pretty good. Reminder, the sex that he didn't want to do but was abused into. Eventually, she broke up with him and offered to stay fuck buddies. Alex was devastated, especially because basically immediately after the breakup, Jennifer started dating Bonnie. But the story doesn't end there. While dating Bonnie, Jennifer would overshare about everything with Alex. She told him about their sex life, what Bonnie enjoyed in bed, all of the really gross details considering one was his ex and the other his good friend since childhood. Something I didn't mention before was that Alex used to have a crush on Bonnie before she came out as a lesbian. So now I'm kind of thinking Jennifer wanted to make Alex jealous from both sides. She definitely knew that Alex wasn't over her if nothing else. He told her multiple times to stop, that it made him uncomfortable, but she never did. Fast forward to 2020, and Bonnie and Jennifer broke up. Jennifer made it seem like it was all Bonnie's fault. So that, combined with Bonnie being a bit mean and judgmental, led to Alex and his friends, Jennifer included, making a new group chat without Bonnie. Jennifer was really affected by the breakup, and she would try to be horny with Alex, but he'd always shut her down. She was drinking a lot and hooking up with random people, some of which she met through catfishing on Facebook. She made a fake profile there to specifically meet women for one-night stands, which didn't seem so weird to Alex at the time, but when we were talking about it recently, he realized how messed up that actually was. Around this time, Jennifer started being really weird about Nick as well, but he, bless his soul, couldn't tell. Nick has always been a bit dense when it comes to things like this. Even now, years later, he finds flirting difficult. But anyway, Jennifer continued to be weird about both Alex and Nick. She was also occasionally crying about missing Bonnie and hating her guts for leaving her. And of course, she was still fighting with Alex on an almost daily basis. They disagreed on a lot of topics, most of which would be deal breakers for me, and I'd probably go no contact with her sooner. Alex didn't, however, because he was still trying to see the best in her. Their friend group was the most active during COVID. After everyone started going to schools again, they had kind of drifted apart, but still used the group chat from time to time. Here's where I finally come along. I met and befriended Alex in early 2022, and we started dating shortly after. He was very open about having a history of not so great relationships and working on himself so he could be the best partner possible. And after 2 years, I can say that he's genuinely grown a lot as a person in therapy, and it's great to see. Jennifer, however, didn't change at all, though she tried her hardest to convince everyone that she did. I'm sure you know at least one person who's like this, posting online how much they support those with bad mental health, but then in private don't do anything to support their friends who actually struggle. As soon as things get ugly, they want nothing to do with you. You can be depressed in a pretty aesthetic way, but as soon as you're anything other than a fake smiler, you're being overly dramatic and mockery to actually depress people. Yeah, Jennifer was just like that. She was preaching about boundaries and self-improvement and openness about symptoms. But when Alex got diagnosed with BPD, she started going on and on about how he was obsessed with her when they dated and for years after, which is true to an extent, I guess. But Alex worked on himself the entire time, and he always apologized, and she never even acknowledged that. Not to mention, she would literally never apologize even if she was clearly in the wrong. Also, to prevent any comments about this, when Alex realized he was abused, we went all over the evidence together. So no, I'm not just blindly trusting my partner. I know the majority of crazy exes discussed online, especially by men or male-leaning people, are totally normal and the dudes are exaggerating. I can confidently say that's not the case here, mostly because of what I'll get into next. So Alex and I started dating, and I wanted to meet as friends. He told me about the group chat and I befriended Nick and Stella. I've always been wary around Jennifer because I know that she used to date Alex, and she was really pretty, and I used to be very insecure at the time. She was also the only one who made no effort to befriend me when Alex made our relationship public. She started saying she wouldn't last and would basically say the same thing every time. Alex used to defend her, saying she was just cynical because they used to date and just broke up badly. Alex would defend her a lot no matter what she did, until she started being weird about me. At this point, Alex and Jennifer considered each other good friends, and me and Alex would hang out over Discord a lot because we were also long distance, but we lived closer together than him and Jennifer, only like an hour away by train. Jennifer would also hang out with them on Discord, often with Nick as well, but never with me. One time she apparently randomly brought me up. "How does being in a relationship with an asexual even work?" she asked Alex. I didn't bring it up before, but I am asexual and out online. This was something I expected, but it was still very uncomfortable to know about. Then she asked if we even had sex. Now, that's a personal question to ask anyone, but especially someone about their partner, not even themselves. Alex managed to dodge the question, and Jennifer finished with "I just can't imagine you in a relationship without sex is all." Reminder that she would manipulate him whenever she wanted sex, and it had to be what she enjoyed regardless of Alex's preferences. But he kept defending her, and I didn't really say much because I felt like I shouldn't tell him to stop being friends with his ex. I was still extremely insecure at this point, and I felt like she hated me because she wanted Alex back. I really knew nothing about their relationship at that point, and I didn't ask to not make my insecurities worse. And this went on for like a year. She would occasionally comment really mean stuff under our matching profile pictures, which sure can be cringy, but we were in love, and it was my first relationship ever, so I wanted to enjoy it. But she was seemingly supportive of our relationship. That is, until October of 2022. I started school again after unrelated mental health problems that prevented me from finishing the previous year, so I was pretty anxious. Alex was always there for me to support me, something that Jennifer had a problem with. Turns out she and Nick dated for a few months earlier in 2022 and decided not to share anything about the relationship with anyone. But Jennifer would overshare with Alex yet again, just using a fake name for Nick. Well, after they broke up, Jennifer started being really weird about Alex yet again, even sending him TikToks about how to finger a woman properly and stuff like that. Alex would sometimes get those messages while calling with me, and he'd go, "Huh? That's weird," but not elaborate further. I really doubt she'd share it for actual education since she didn't even know what genitals I have, as I'm out as non-binary and very careful not to let anyone know my assigned gender. But I digress. It's just a really weird thing in hindsight. But the really weird thing happened later, just a week before my birthday. I didn't know that it happened for a while, but we were supposed to celebrate it with Alex, and he ended up having a breakdown seemingly caused by me just wanting to spend as much time with him as possible. That kind of triggered my codependent tendencies, and our relationship was somewhat rocky for the next 2 months. Only later did I find out the cause for this breakdown was actually Jennifer. She accused Alex of being selfish, something she loved to do without ever bringing up actual examples. But this time it was specifically because he wanted to spend time with me, and in her words, blew her off because of it. Now, something to note here is that at this time, it would often be me, Alex, and Nick all hanging out together, so Alex offered that Jennifer could join us and finally actually meet me, but she refused. She basically said I'm a baby compared to her, and she doesn't want to parent me. I am just 6 months younger than Alex, though sure, She called him immature and incapable of taking care of himself as well. But I'm older than Stella, and she didn't have a problem with her being still a teenager. Also, again, this was right before my 20th birthday, so even if she didn't want any teen friends, I was literally only 2 years younger than her, which might be a deal breaker for some people, but she clearly didn't mind hanging out with even younger people that she approved of. Also, she indirectly insulted my friends by saying they must be babies as well who couldn't possibly have anything in common with her, despite her knowing literally nothing about my friends and how old or mature they are. Feeling like crap again sent Alex into a spiral where he felt like he couldn't hang out with just one person or they'd start being dependent on him, which I guess unfortunately kinda happened with me as well, which made everything worse. Thankfully, we managed to make things work, and in 2023, I had started antidepressants as well as medication for my ADHD, which made living actually pretty easy. Alex didn't formally cut Jennifer off, but they never texted much anymore, and they didn't ever hang out over Discord again, I'm pretty sure. My relationship with Alex was great, and he started doing really well with therapy, and almost didn't split anymore. That is, unless something particularly triggering happened. And knowing what I do now, those triggers would be more of me reminding him of how Jennifer used to act. Thanks to therapy, he finally realized how much she abused him even after they broke up. But he was okay with never contacting her again and letting her just be part of his past that he's now healing from. He did, however, contact Bonnie just to get her side of the story after years. Bonnie texted back pretty much just appreciating that he reached out and confirming that she'd been abused as well, but that she has fully moved on, found a loving girlfriend, and they moved into another country together. The fact that she had her life completely together will be important soon, so remember that. Earlier this year in April of 2024, we found what she wrote about him because I randomly remembered that she had a Wattpad account and was curious if she was still writing, since I recently got back into writing as well. The story was basically a series of unfortunate events that happened to Jennifer, with her presented as the ultimate victim. She described how a friend of hers from high school changed and had started spreading rumors about her, which in her own words ended her life, and ever since 2016 she was a living corpse. For someone who loved to say how much she loves moving on from toxicity, holding on to a friendship that lasted less than a year and ended how teenage girl friendships often do is a little weird. Then she wrote about meeting Alex and falling in love with Bonnie at first sight. Basically what I described earlier. Once she got to the uncomfortable conversation, she described how proud she was, but not about faking the seizure, but about how she confessed to Alex that she wanted someone else. Then she described the seizure as being real. That kinda set Alex off when we read it together, so he wrote her a message basically saying, "Hey, this isn't what you'd always tell me happened. You confessed to faking it, and I remember how the conversation went exactly." And she replied. They had a fight where she accused him of thinking of himself as the center of the universe, called him selfish, and of course continued to lie, even after Alex recalled the exact conversation they had about it to her. One message she sent him really pissed me off. It was basically, "You must be with Bonnie now. I wish you both the best." Which just to me seemed like she was both ignoring the fact that Bonnie was a lesbian and thus only into women, which was apparently something she would doubt about Bonnie even though they were dating, and still assuming Alex and I wouldn't last. She also said it's obvious how he talked to Bonnie and Jennifer's other exes because calling her out would be something they'd do. Now, Alex only ever talked to Bonnie. Jennifer hadn't mentioned the other exes to him ever before. So that to me felt like she still wanted him to be obsessed with her and literally stalk out her exes to get them to talk shit about her. And considering how Bonnie responded to the whole thing, I doubt Jennifer's other exes would still be so hung up about her either. But the thing that made me the most angry was that Jennifer just didn't think Alex would have been capable of forming that opinion by himself. She'd always see him as a toy unable to think or act for himself, and it really came clear here. So Alex wrote her one last message, essentially telling her to fuck off and leave him alone. And that was that. Or that's what I'd love to say. But the story doesn't end there. The next day, we were hanging out with Nick again, and Alex brought up the whole confrontation. Nick is the type of person to want to see the best in people, but even he was horrified. We also found out that she lied about a bunch of things about her relationship with Nick, most notably the fact that he didn't want to sleep with her. Nick told us that yes, he was hesitant, but only because she accused him of only being with her because of sex. Dear listeners, Nick is a virgin. He couldn't make sense of it at the time, so he just decided not to start anything just in case. Sometime after they broke up, Jennifer also texted Alex how she wanted to rape Nick because he left her. Alex was understandably weirded out, but she was drunk and clearly unwell, so he focused on helping her through the breakdown. Alex would always do that for her whenever she was spiraling, and only recently he realized how much of a toll it took on him. Eventually he messaged Stella as well, and he told her about everything, and she basically confirmed all of it, especially how nasty she was to Alex, specifically even in the group chat. Nick noticed that as well, but he used to think it was because they had a fight or something, so Jennifer was just being petty. Stella stopped talking to her because of that. She'd always been friends with Alex before Nick or Jennifer, and finally, everything was laid to rest. Alex talked about Jennifer in therapy, finally addressing all the issues he still dealt with as a result of her abuse. Jennifer tried contacting Nick, but he essentially became a wall and wouldn't let her get any info about Alex. She's still posting the same seemingly support crap on social media. She's also dating a guy who seems to be a fan of Andrew Tate, so they're either on the same page or he's just another victim of hers. I admit I used to be kind of drawn to the drama because I wanted Alex to be okay and Jennifer to end up completely alone with everyone knowing what kind of person she is. But now I just don't care. Jennifer, if you're somehow listening, know that whatever you think about Alex now isn't true. He's living his best life with me by his side and all of our friends who are way too immature for you. I would say that I hope you'll experience some kind of karma, but like I said, I couldn't care less about your pathetic life. I know you probably told everyone that Alex was the abuser, just like you did with Bonnie when she cut you off, but for the first time I can confidently say that Alex won't be affected. And to everyone else, know that abuse can look like a lot of things, and it doesn't always end when a relationship ends. If you want to keep an ex in your life and they keep making you feel terrible, do yourself a favor and cut them off. It's what they deserve. Yes, toxic relationships often have issues on both sides, but if you know you're working to be a better person, that's all that matters. Unfortunately, to become a better person, you have to first accept what you did wrong, which Jennifer seems still incapable of doing. But I wish you all the best, and remember, you have value and deserve to be treated right no matter what the people in your life say. I live in a very rural area in Tennessee, and this happened either the summer of 92 or 93, so I was a preteen. I can still see this in my mind like it happened yesterday. Like I said before, a rural area in Tennessee where we used to have some serious issues with people dumping unwanted, worn-out items as well as garbage down our beautiful hillsides and ravines. At that time, it was common to find illegal dumping sites everywhere because there was no bulk pickup offered by our one-waste disposal monopoly. In this part of the state, the economic disparity is obvious. You have some of the poorest people and some multiple mansion and vacation homes folks. My family fell somewhere in the upper middle class. Thinking Titanic, we would be in either the lowest rung of first class or the very top of second class. Unfortunately, the majority would be in the steerage or the coal bunker. Well, it was August in Tennessee, aka sun-scorching heat and enough humidity to make it slightly uncomfortable to breathe. Many describe it as the swamp-ass capital of the state. Anyway, we had just had an extraordinarily rare murder in our county. It was all that anyone was talking about. It was all you heard in our churches and beauty salons. The victim was largely unknown, a woman in her early 30s and nowhere near wealthy. I didn't know her, nor did anyone. She had moved here less than a year ago and kept to herself, and she hadn't been reported missing. Then just before our summer break came to an end, this lady was found at the base of a steep incline, deep in one of our densely wooded areas by some folks out for a nature hike. There she was found at the base of a large illegal dump on a winding dirt road that was barely wide enough for one vehicle. If you met another car, one of you would have to pull over so far you were almost off the road entirely. Even creepier, the road was named Bone Road. Yeah. When she was found, she had lost everything from the neck up, but both of her upper and lower areas were recovered. Her killer had not been caught. So my mom was born and raised here and was of strong yet goofy stock. She has always been my best buddy, even when dropping the hammer on my brother and me. She was loved by every student she had ever taught. Our friends adored my goofy mama, often telling me how lucky I was to have her. My dad was a pharmacist in our area, smarter than most and happy to go fill a lost or forgotten prescription even late into the night. My dad isn't from here, but is very well known because of his job. Everyone knows my mama because she and most of our huge family have been here since our ancestors settled here in the 1800s. The rest of her family lived in Middle Tennessee. On that day in August, we had been at a family reunion picnic at the beautiful naturally made lake we lived near. Suddenly, a scattered thunderstorm had popped up and brought our get-together to an end. It was just me and my mom. But on the ride home, we had decided we were Sherlock Holmes and Watson. We wanted to see the crime scene. I know, brilliant. My dad was at work and my brother was with a friend. Again, this was 92 or 93, so no GPS, Alexa, Siri, or Google Earth, not even MapQuest. My dad was on our school board and had been given a highly detailed map of our entire county. Since neither of us knew how to reach Bone Road, it was agreed the map would be our guide. We went home, grabbed the map, and set out like we were Magellan. We eventually found the place and headed to the spot. Being the ignorant rubberneckers we were, we had just planned to drive past the stupid dump site. I can't explain how creepy this place was. A murder dump in the middle of BFE on a road that started with a blacktop, transitioned to gravel, and then a good old dirt road. It was middle afternoon, but the sudden rain on the August ground made the area steamy. Literal steam was emanating from the road, the fields, the woods, everywhere. That just added to the thrill of our folly. As we approached the location, there was a blind curve, making it impossible to see the place until you were right up on it. When we rounded that corner, we saw we were not alone. A very dirty man had his very dirty truck pulled over at the dump, just far enough to allow us to pass. Sure, Joe Dirt could have just been another Lucky Lou like us, but he gave off a creepy as fuck kind of vibe. He was just standing by his truck, looking down into the dump. It wasn't a sheriff's officer. We know all of our local authorities, and they had cleared the location a day or so before. Anyone could access this area. As we squeezed past his truck, he was standing on the passenger side of our car. I'm 12 or 13, I can drive, so he was on my side as we passed. So close to him I could see his two teeth clear as day. He just smiled in this uber creeptastic, almost leering way. Not nice, not friendly. We got past and thanked the Lord that Mr. Tooth hadn't followed us. We agreed we would reach the end of Bone Road and then get the hell out of there. Oh, you know, there's a but. We reached the end of Bone Road, ending at a field. Bone Road was a dead end. No pun intended. My mom said the words I had been screaming in my head. Oh, fuck! We had no choice. We had to do a 5-point turn and go back from where we came. Oh, I bet he's gone now. My mom's feeble attempt to soothe us both. Guess what? He was still there. Still smiling his huge two-tooth smile. Now, as my adult self reflected on this, he could have come after us, knowing we would be cornered, but neither of us have ever been accused of being too rational. We made it out unscathed, of course, and my dad hit the roof when he heard the tapestry of idiocy our afternoon adventure was. But you know there's always a but. Days later, our local newspaper heralded the good news. The murderer was caught. The woman had been killed by a boyfriend turned stalker. She had moved here from a town about 45 minutes away to get away from him, but he found her. He just drove around with her body in his truck before happening on the dump. Happily ever after? No. as we stared down at this guy's mugshot. It was real. Mr. Two Tooth was her killer. We never told my dad about that part. Mr. Two Tooth was convicted of first-degree murder and abuse of a corpse. He will die in the state prison system serving life with no parole. Still, Mom and I promised we would never be so dumb again. We still have weird adventures, but not too freaky remote murder dump sites to unknown terrain and with no one knowing where we are. We really could have met our literal dead end. It's an odd thing knowing that you had been face to face with a brutal murderer, not once but twice. Well, I did have a super too close to call run-in with another murderer, but that will have to be another post on another day. Hey everyone, that's about it for today's stories. If you have your own story that you would like to send, you can send it in at southerncannibal.com, or you can email it at southerncannibalstories@gmail.com. I look forward to telling your story. Have a good night or good day, everyone. And remember to always stay